I was lying in the emergency room, blood seeping through bandages on my forehead, when my father walked through those hospital doors. Not to check if I was alive after the 18-wheeler had crushed my car like a soda can. Not to hold my hand while doctors assessed whether I'd ever walk properly again. He came for money. For my younger sister, Emma, the same sister who'd stolen my identity 6 months ago and left me drowning in debt. And I was about to discover this accident was no coincidence. The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed seemed to pulse with each wave of pain shooting through my skull. 3 hours earlier, I'd been driving home from my second job at the warehouse, exhausted after a 14-hour shift. My hands had been steady on the wheel of my old Honda Civic, the same car I'd bought with cash 4 years ago because my credit was already starting to show signs of trouble I didn't yet understand. The intersection of Maple and Fifth Street was always quiet at 2 in the morning. I remember thinking about the leftover pasta in my fridge, wondering if I'd have enough energy to heat it up before collapsing into bed. The traffic light was green. I was going 35 miles per hour, exactly the speed limit. Then I saw the headlights of the truck. It came from my left, barreling through the red light at what must have been 60 miles per hour. What struck me most wasn't the speed, but the precision. The driver made no attempt to brake, no screech of tires, no last-second swerve. The massive front grille of that 18-wheeler aimed directly at my driver's side door like a guided missile seeking its target. The impact folded my car in half. Glass exploded around me in a shower of diamonds that caught the streetlight before gravity claimed them. The airbag detonated with such force it felt like being punched by a giant. And then everything went dark until I woke up here in Columbia General's emergency room with blood turning the white pillowcase pink beneath my head. "Ha ha, ma'am, I need you to stay still," a nurse with kind brown eyes and graying hair was saying. Her name tag read Patricia, and her hands were gentle as she adjusted the IV line snaking into my arm. "You've got a concussion and some serious bruising. The doctor wants to run more tests to make sure there's no internal bleeding." I tried to nod, but the movement sent lightning through my skull. "My insurance information is in my wallet," I managed to whisper through cracked lips. Patricia's expression shifted, something flickering across her features that looked like pity. "We've already run your information, honey. Your insurance was canceled 6 months ago." 6 months ago. The exact time frame when my life had started its downward spiral. Bills appearing for credit cards I'd never opened. Collection calls for loans I'd never taken. My savings drained by automatic payments to accounts that weren't mine. All roads led back to one person, but I'd never imagined she could be capable of leaving me this vulnerable. The emergency room doors burst open with a bang that made me flinch. My father, Harold Winters, strode through like he owned the place. At 62, he still carried himself with the authority of the bank manager he'd been for 30 years before retirement. His gray suit was pressed, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. He looked like he'd come from a business meeting, not from his bed after hearing his eldest daughter had nearly died. His eyes swept the room and landed on me. There was no relief in his expression, no rush of parental concern. He walked toward my bed with measured steps, reaching into his jacket pocket as he approached. For one brief moment, I thought he might pull out a handkerchief, some gesture of care. Instead, he withdrew a manila folder thick with papers. "Lucy," he said, my name falling from his lips like a business greeting. "I heard about your accident." "Dad," I breathed, hating how my voice cracked with emotion he didn't deserve. "The truck came out of nowhere. I could have died." He glanced at my bandages with the same interest he might show a stranger's minor inconvenience. "Yes, well, you're alive. That's what matters. Now we need to discuss Emma's situation." My damaged ribs protested as I tried to sit up straighter. "Emma's situation, Dad. I'm lying in the emergency room. I just survived a crash that should have killed me." Harold's jaw tightened with impatience. "Emma needs $50,000 for emergency surgery. You're the only one with access to that kind of money." "What money?" I laughed, but it came out bitter and sharp. Emma stole my identity, remember? She drained my accounts, destroyed my credit. I'm working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over my head because of what she did. She's your sister, Harold said, as if that excused everything. As if those 3 words could erase the months of financial devastation and betrayal. He opened the folder, spreading medical bills across my hospital blanket. The letterhead caught my eye immediately. Bella Vista Clinic. I read aloud, my foggy brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Dad, that's not a hospital. That's a cosmetic surgery center in Beverly Hills. His face remained impassive. The surgery is critical. Critical. My voice rose despite the pain it caused. I know that clinic. Emma works there as a receptionist. She's been posting photos from their company parties for the past year. What kind of emergency surgery does a healthy 28-year-old need from a place that specializes in nose jobs and liposuction? Harold's phone buzzed. He pulled it out with an irritated sigh. "Check this for me," he said, handing it over. "My eyes aren't good in this light." I took the phone with trembling fingers, squinting at the bright screen. The text was from Emma. "Is she awake? Did she agree? Derek says we need the money by tomorrow or else." My blood, already cold from shock and pain medication, turned to ice. Derek. Emma's boyfriend of 8 months. The one with the expensive car and designer clothes, but no visible means of income. The one who always seemed to have a big deal just around the corner that never materialized. "She's in trouble with Derek?" I said slowly, pieces falling into place. "This isn't about surgery. This is about his gambling debts." Harold snatched the phone back, but his moment of panic told me everything. He knew. He'd known all along and still chose to walk into my hospital room with lies and demands while my blood was still drying on the pavement at Maple and Fifth. The morphine drip couldn't numb the deeper pain that spread through my chest as I stared at my father. 29 years of memories flooded back, each one a small cut that had led to this moment of complete severance. I was 3 years old when Emma was born. I remember the day clearly, because it was the last time my father looked at me with uncomplicated love. The moment he held Emma with her perfect rosebud mouth and delicate features, something shifted in Harold Winters' universe. Suddenly I was the practice child and Emma was the masterpiece. "Lucy's smart," he would tell his friends when I brought home straight A's. "But Emma, she's special. Look at that face. She'll go far." By the time I was 18, I understood my role in the family ecosystem. I was the workhorse, reliable and sturdy. Emma was the show pony meant for admiration and indulgence. When college acceptance letters arrived, Harold celebrated Emma's acceptance to a mid-tier party school with a lavish dinner at the country club. My full scholarship to Northwestern's engineering program earned a nod and a comment about how I'd be able to help pay for Emma's tuition. And I did. For 4 years, I worked 3 jobs while maintaining my grades. The campus coffee shop from 5 to 8 in the morning, tutoring in the afternoons, and weekend shifts at a call center. Every extra penny went home to ensure Emma could focus on her networking opportunities and social development. Harold assured me this was an investment in our family's future. Emma would marry well, he said. She'd elevate us all. The memories kept flowing as I watched Harold fidget with his folder of fake medical bills. I remembered graduation day, walking across the stage knowing my parents had chosen to attend Emma's sorority formal in Miami instead. "You understand," Harold had said over the phone. "This is Emma's last big college event." I understood perfectly. I understood when I started my career as a junior engineer and Harold asked me to co-sign Emma's apartment lease because her credit was still developing. I understood when Emma dropped out of college 6 credits short of graduating to pursue opportunities in Los Angeles, and I paid for her moving expenses. I understood when she needed help with rent, utilities, car payments, and the 1,000 other expenses that came with maintaining an image she couldn't afford. "You've been thinking about this all wrong." Harold's voice pulled me back to the present. He'd pulled a chair close to my bed, leaning in with the same expression he used to wear when explaining why I couldn't have dance lessons, because Emma needed a pageant coach. Family helps family. You've always understood that. I understood it when I was paying for her life, I said quietly. I understood it right up until 6 months ago when credit card bills started arriving for accounts I never opened, when my savings account was emptied through transfers to banks in Emma's neighborhood, when my credit score dropped 400 points overnight because of loans taken out in my name. Harold waved his hand dismissively. Emma explained all that. She was desperate. Derek was threatening her. And instead of coming to me, she chose to destroy my financial life. My voice was steady now, fueled by a clarity that cut through the pain medication. I would have helped her. I always helped her. Patricia, the nurse, appeared at the foot of my bed with a clipboard. Ms. Winters, the doctor needs to discuss your treatment plan. Without insurance, we'll need to work out payment arrangements. The initial estimate for your emergency care alone is around $12,000. Harold didn't even glance at her. His focus remained laser sharp on me. Once you help Emma with this situation, I'm sure she'll be able to pay you back for everything. With what money? I asked. Her receptionist's salary, or are you expecting Derek's gambling to suddenly start paying off? Something flickered in Harold's eyes. He reached for his phone again, checking a message with poorly concealed anxiety. His reaction made me study him more carefully. The expensive suit I'd assumed was just Harold being Harold now seemed out of place for someone who'd been retired for 2 years. The Rolex on his wrist was new, certainly not something his pension could have afforded. "Dad," I said slowly, "how did you know I was in an accident?" He froze for just a moment before recovering. "The hospital called me. I'm your emergency contact." "No." I shook my head, ignoring the way it made the room spin. "You said, 'I heard about your accident.' Not, 'the hospital called.' Not, 'I got a call.' You heard about it. From whom?" His phone rang before he could answer. The ringtone was unfamiliar, not the classical music he'd always preferred. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "I need to take this," he said, practically jumping from the chair. He stepped into the hallway, but not before I heard him answer with, "Yes, I'm here. No, she hasn't agreed yet." Patricia returned to check my IV, her kind eyes taking in the scene with the wisdom of someone who'd seen every type of family drama play out in these rooms. "Honey," she said, softly adjusting my blanket, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but we had someone call about an hour before you arrived. They wanted to know if a Lucy Winters had been brought in yet. Seemed odd at the time asking about an accident victim before the accident was reported." My blood felt like it had stopped moving through my veins entirely. An hour before I arrived meant they called before the crash even happened. Someone knew I was going to be hit. Someone was waiting for confirmation. I looked through the doorway where Harold was pacing his free hand, gesturing animatedly as he spoke into the phone. My father, who had spent my entire life explaining why Emma deserved more, needed more, was worth more. My father, who walked into my hospital room not to comfort his injured daughter, but to extract money for the favored one. The puzzle pieces were arranging themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. Emma's identity theft 6 months ago, the canceled insurance, the truck that didn't even try to brake, someone calling to confirm I'd been brought in, Harold arriving with his folder of lies, desperate for money I didn't have for a surgery that wasn't real. As my father ended his call and turned back toward my room, I saw him with new eyes. The man who had raised me, who had taught me to save and sacrifice for family, who had preached loyalty above all else, was walking back into my room with secrets written in every line of his face. "Lucy," he started, but I held up my hand, surprising myself with how steady it was. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "Now." "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed, but there was something new in his eyes. Fear. "This is about family." "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "This is about betrayal, and I'm done being the only one in this family who doesn't betray." Harold's face flushed red, the folder crumpling in his grip. But before he could respond, my best friend Maria burst through the emergency room doors, her paralegal suit wrinkled from what must have been a desperate rush to get here. Her eyes found mine immediately, then narrowed as she took in Harold's presence. "Lucy," she said, slightly out of breath, "I came as soon as I heard. I've been trying to reach you all evening about what I found in those insurance documents." Harold took a step backward, and I noticed his hands were trembling now. Maria's arrival had upset some calculation in his head, disrupted some timeline he was working against. "What insurance documents?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer would shatter whatever remained of my family. Maria Martinez had been my anchor since college, the one person who saw through my family's dynamics with laser precision. Standing 5 feet 2 inches in her sensible heels, she commanded attention through sheer force of will and an intellect that had made her indispensable at Brennan and Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. Her arrival in my hospital room felt like reinforcements arriving just as the battle turned desperate. "Step away from her bed, Mr. Winters," Maria said coolly, positioning herself between Harold and me. Her dark eyes missed nothing cataloging my injuries, the medical bills scattered on my blanket, and Harold's defensive posture. "Lucy, we need to talk about what I discovered, privately. This is a family matter." Harold protested, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had once made me automatically comply. "I'm her father, and I'm her designated medical power of attorney." Maria shot back, producing a document from her briefcase, a precaution we took 6 months ago when her identity was stolen by her sister, your other daughter. The mention of the power of attorney made Harold's face cycle through several shades of red. I'd forgotten about that document signed during those chaotic weeks when I was trying to protect what remained of my finances. Maria had insisted on it, saying I needed someone trustworthy, making decisions if anything happened to me. Now her foresight felt prophetic. A knock interrupted the standoff. A woman in a severe Navy suit entered, her hospital administrator badge identifying her as Sandra Coleman. Her expression was as professionally neutral, but I could see concern etched in the lines around her eyes. "Ms. Winters," she began, clutching a tablet to her chest, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss your situation. Our billing department has completed their review of your insurance status." "She doesn't have insurance," Harold interjected quickly, "but the family will handle the bills. We just need a payment plan." Sandra's eyes flicked to Harold, then back to me. "Actually, that's what I need to discuss. Our records show your insurance was canceled 6 months ago, but the circumstances are unusual." Maria stepped closer to the bed, her legal instincts clearly triggered. "Unusual how?" "The cancellation came after a series of claims that maxed out Ms. Winters' annual benefits," Sandra explained, scrolling through her tablet. "Claims for treatments at various high-end medical spas, cosmetic procedures, even a week-long stay at a wellness retreat in Sedona. All of them filed using Ms. Winters' information, but with different contact numbers and addresses." My stomach churned, and not from the concussion. I've never been to Sedona. I've never even had a facial, much less cosmetic procedures. "The addresses," Maria said sharply. "Where were these services supposedly delivered?" Sandra consulted her screen. "Multiple locations in the Beverly Hills area. The contact number on all claims links to a Emma Winters." I heard Harold's sharp intake of breath. Maria's hand found mine and squeezed. The fraud went deeper than stolen credit cards and drained bank accounts. Emma had systematically destroyed my medical safety net, burning through my insurance benefits on luxury treatments while I worked double shifts to stay afloat. "There's more," Sandra continued, her voice gentler now. "Your employer provided insurance attempted to renew last month, but you were flagged as high risk due to the excessive claims. The premium increase was beyond what your company's plan would cover. You were dropped from group coverage." So she's been without insurance for a month, Harold said quickly. Too quickly. These things happen. We'll work something out. Maria whirled on him. These things happen. Your daughter's identity theft left Lucy completely vulnerable, and you call it something that happens. I should also mention, Sandra added, that someone called our billing department 3 days ago to verify that Lucy Winters had no active insurance. They claimed to be calling from her employer, but when I followed up, HR had no record of the inquiry. 3 days ago, before the accident, someone had been checking, making sure I'd be financially destroyed if I survived. Harold's phone buzzed again. This time when he looked at it, his face went ashen. I need to step out, he muttered, but Mariah moved to block his path. I don't think so, she said firmly. Not until you hear what else I found. Lucy, remember when I started investigating the identity theft, I found something strange about your life insurance policies. But policies? I asked, confused. I only have the basic one through work. Well, that's what you think, Mariah said, pulling out her phone. But according to my research, you have 4 active life insurance policies. The one through your employer, yes, but also 3 others, all purchased in the last 8 weeks. Total death benefit, $2.5 million. The hospital room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in as the implications crashed over me. I could hear my heart monitor beeping faster, matching the panic building in my chest. Who are the beneficiaries? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Maria's eyes never left Harold's face as she answered. Emma Winters is primary on all 3 new policies, but here's where it gets interesting. The applications were submitted online using your stolen identity, but the IP address has traces back to a computer at Bella Vista Clinic, where Emma works. This is ridiculous, Harold blustered, but sweat was beading on his forehead. You're suggesting my daughter that she would purchase life insurance on her sister 2 weeks before someone tried to kill her. Maria finished. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Patricia, the nurse, appeared in the doorway looking troubled. Ms. Winters, there's a Detective Morrison here. He says he needs to speak with you about your accident. Send him in, Maria said before I could respond. She turned back to Harold, whose exit was now completely blocked. I think we all need to hear what the detective has to say. Detective Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with prematurely gray temples and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room in seconds. He introduced himself with a firm handshake to everyone present, his expression grave. That was Winters. He began pulling out a small notebook. I've been reviewing the traffic cameras from the intersection where you were hit. The truck that struck you was reported stolen 6 hours before the accident. We found it abandoned 3 miles away. So the driver ran. I said, though, something in his expression suggested more. That's the thing, Morrison continued. The truck was stolen from a long-term parking lot at O'Hare Airport. The owner was out of the country, wouldn't have reported it missing for weeks. Whoever took it knew exactly which vehicle to target. Professionals, Maria murmured. Morrison nodded. That's our thinking, but here's what really concerns me. The traffic footage shows the truck parked on a side street with a clear view of the warehouse where you work. It sat there for 2 hours, engine running. The driver was waiting specifically for your car. My hands started trembling. This wasn't a random hit and run or even a targeted attack by an amateur. Someone had hired a professional to kill me. Someone who knew my schedule, my route home, my car. Mr. Winters, Detective Morrison said, turning his attention to Harold. Where were you between midnight and 2 this morning? Home, Harold said quickly. Asleep, with my wife. Your wife, Morrison repeated, making a note. That would be Dorothy Winters. We'll need to verify that with her. Something flickered across Harold's face at the mention of Dorothy. Maria caught it too, her eyes sharpening. Until that moment, I'd forgotten Harold had remarried. The wedding had been small family only 3 months ago, except I hadn't been invited. Emma had sent me a text about it after the fact, as if my exclusion was perfectly normal. I should call Dorothy. Harold said, reaching for his phone. Let her know what's happened. No need, Detective Morrison said calmly. We've already sent officers to your house to speak with her. He paused, watching Harold's reaction carefully. Strange thing, though. Your neighbors say they haven't seen her in days. Her car's been gone since Tuesday. Tuesday, 3 days ago. The same day someone called to verify I had no insurance. Harold's phone rang again, the sound sharp in the tense silence. This time we could all see the caller ID before he declined the call. Emma. You should answer that, Morrison suggested mildly. Could be important. It's nothing, Harold insisted, but his hands were visibly shaking now. She's probably just worried about her sister. Maria laughed, but it was harsh and without humor. Worried she's been stealing from Lucy for 6 months, and now we find out she's the beneficiary on secret life insurance policies. I don't think worry is what Emma's feeling right now. The phone immediately rang again. This time, Morrison plucked it from Harold's hand before he could decline the call. Answer it, he instructed. Act normal. Harold took the phone with trembling fingers and answered. Even from where I lay, I could hear Emma's panicked voice spilling through the speaker. Dad, where are you? Is it done? Derek's here and he's losing it. He says if we don't have the money by morning, he's going to... Dad, I'm scared. Dorothy isn't answering her phone and... Morrison made a cutting motion, and Harold quickly ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Is it done? Maria repeated slowly. She asked if it was done. Harold's face had gone from ashen to gray, aging 10 years in as many seconds. He sank into the chair by my bed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. When he finally looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen before in my father's eyes, shame. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear to you, Lucy, I didn't know they were going to hurt you. I thought it was just about the money. Ooh, what money? Morrison asked sharply. What were you supposed to get done? Harold's answer shattered the last illusion I had about my family, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Harold's hands covered his face, and for a moment, he looked like what he was, an old man who'd gambled away his soul and lost. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Emma came to me 2 weeks ago. He began each word, seeming to cost him. She was hysterical. Derek owed money to some very dangerous people, $40,000. They'd already broken his hand as a warning. So you decided to have your other daughter murdered for insurance money. Maria's voice could have cut glass. No. Harold's head snapped up. I told you I didn't know about any plan to hurt Lucy. Emma said she'd taken out insurance policies, yes, but she said we'd fake Lucy's death, create documents showing she died overseas or something. Lucy would get a new identity, start fresh somewhere away from all the debts Emma had created in her name. Everyone would win. The delusion of it took my breath away. In Harold's mind, forcing me to abandon my entire life was somehow a favor. Detective Morrison was writing furiously, but his expression suggested he'd heard similar justifications from criminals before. And Dorothy, Morrison prompted, where does your wife fit into this? Harold's face crumbled further. Dorothy. She used to work in insurance. She knew how to make claims look legitimate. She said she'd handle everything, make it clean. No one would get hurt. Except me. I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'd lose my name, my career, everything I've worked for. But I suppose that didn't matter as long as Emma got her money. Before Harold could respond, the door burst open. A young officer rushed in his face, flushed with urgency. Detective, we need you outside. Now. We found something in the truck. Morrison excused himself, but we could see him through the glass doors, his expression growing darker as the officer showed him something on a tablet. Maria squeezed my hand tighter, and even Harold seemed to sense that whatever was coming would be worse than what we'd already uncovered. When Morrison returned, he was carrying an evidence bag containing a cell phone. Mr. Winters, do you recognize this device? Harold leaned forward, then jerked back as if burned. That looks like Dorothy's personal phone, not the one she usually uses, but her burner phone. Morrison said flatly. We found it hidden in the stolen truck, still logged into her messaging app. He turned to me, his expression apologetic. Ms. Winters, I need to show you something, but it's going to be difficult to see. He pulled up images on his tablet screenshots of text conversations. The contact was saved only as D, but the content made everything horrifyingly clear. Phase 1 complete. Target acquired and tracked. Confirm insurance status. No coverage active. Warehouse shift ends at 2. Maple Street intersection optimal. Make it look accidental. If she survives, we go to Phase 2 at the hospital. Phase 2. If I survived the crash, there was a backup plan. I was lying in a hospital bed, vulnerable and unguarded, and somewhere out there Dorothy was planning Phase 2. Maria grabbed Morrison's arm. You need to post security, now. Lucy's not safe here. Already done, Morrison assured her. There are officers at every entrance. But Mr. Winters, we need to know where Dorothy is. When did you last see her? Harold seemed to age another decade before our eyes. Tuesday morning, she said she was visiting her sister in Milwaukee, but her sister called yesterday, looking for her, so she's been preparing, Morrison finished. Mr. Winters, I need you to think carefully. Does Dorothy have any medical training? Any experience with hospitals? The question seemed odd until Harold's face went white with realization. She was a nurse. Years ago, before she got into insurance investigation, she kept her license current, said it was good to have options. A nurse. Dorothy could walk into any hospital without raising suspicion. She could access restricted areas, medical supplies, patient records. Phase 2 suddenly had terrifying implications. Morrison was already on his radio alerting hospital security to be on the lookout for Dorothy Winters. He provided a description: 55 years old, blonde hair, usually worn in a bun, approximately 5 feet 6 inches, likely wearing scrubs or medical attire. That's not right, Harold interrupted. Dorothy's hair is brown and she's barely 5 feet tall. Morrison and Maria exchanged glances. Mr. Winters, the detective said slowly, how long have you known Dorothy? 4 months, Harold admitted. We met at a grief support group. She'd lost her husband and I was dealing with my divorce from Lucy and Emma's mother. We connected quickly, married last month. 4 months, Maria repeated. And in that time, did you ever meet her family? Visit her previous home, see photos from her past? Harold's silence was answer enough. He'd married a stranger, brought her into our family's chaos, and never questioned who she really was. Patricia, who'd been quietly monitoring my vitals throughout these revelations, suddenly spoke up. Excuse me, detective, but we had an incident earlier that might be relevant. About an hour ago, security caught someone in scrubs trying to access the pharmacy. She didn't have proper credentials, claimed to be a new hire who hadn't received her badge yet. Security escorted her out, but... Description, Morrison asked urgently. Middle-aged woman, blonde hair in a bun, about 5'6". She seemed to know her way around, mentioned she'd worked here before. Dorothy. She'd already been in the building, already attempted to access drugs that could be used to ensure I didn't survive the night. Phase 2 had already begun. We need to move Lucy, Maria said decisively. Different hospital, different city if necessary. I can arrange a transfer, Sandra Coleman offered. We have a partnership with St. Mary's on the north side. Their security is excellent, and we can use their private ambulance service. As they discussed logistics, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. The number was unknown, but the message made my blood freeze. You were supposed to die at that intersection. Your father failed us. Your sister owes us money. We're coming to collect one way or another. D. Morrison took my phone immediately, but the damage was done. Dorothy wasn't just Harold's mysterious wife. She wasn't just an ex-nurse with insurance fraud experience. She was connected to Derek's creditors, possibly one of them herself. This wasn't about family dysfunction or financial desperation. This was about organized crime using my family's weaknesses to execute a murder for profit. Oh God! Harold moaned, the full weight of his choices finally crushing him. What have I done, Lucy? What have I done? Before I could answer, and honestly, what could I say to the man who'd sold me out for his favored daughter, another text arrived. This time it was a photo. Emma duct tape over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Derek beside her, but he looked as terrified as she did. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure in surgical scrubs and a blonde wig. The caption read, "Your sister thought she could play games with professional people. Your father thought he could back out of our deal. You have 1 hour to sign over your grandmother's inheritance, or Emma learns what happens to people who don't pay their debts. Dorothy knows exactly which drugs cause the most pain before stopping the heart. 1 hour. D. My grandmother's inheritance? I looked at Maria confused. What are they talking about? Grandma died in debt. She didn't leave anything. But Harold's face told a different story. His shoulders shook as he began to cry ugly sobs that seemed to tear from somewhere deep inside. She didn't die in debt, he choked out. Mother left everything to you, $3.2 million. You were supposed to be notified on your 33rd birthday, next week. But Dorothy found out. She has connections at the probate court. She knew about the money before I did. The room spun, and not from my concussion. My grandmother, who I thought died penniless in a nursing home, had been a millionaire. My father had known. Dorothy had known. Everyone had known except me, the actual heir. And now they were using Emma as leverage to steal it. But Emma doesn't know, Harold continued desperately. She thinks this is all about Derek's gambling debts. She has no idea about Mother's money or Dorothy's real identity. Lucy, despite everything, Emma didn't know they were planning to kill you. She's greedy and selfish, but she's not a murderer. Morrison was already coordinating with SWAT tracing the phone's location, but I knew Dorothy wouldn't be that sloppy. She'd been planning this too carefully, covering too many angles. Whatever happened next, it would be on her terms. We need to set a trap, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. Dorothy thinks I'm weak, injured, scared. Let her think she's winning. Absolutely not, Maria protested. Lucy, you have a concussion, possible internal injuries. You're in no condition to play games with a killer. But my mind was clearer than it had been in months. For the first time in my life, I could see my family's dynamics with perfect clarity. Harold's favoritism had created a monster in Emma, a woman so entitled she'd destroy her sister's life without hesitation. That same favoritism had made me the perpetual sacrifice, always giving, never receiving. But it had also made me stronger than any of them realized. Get me a laptop, I said to Morrison, and a secure line to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. If Dorothy wants to play games with inheritance law and insurance fraud, let's show her what happens when you threaten a structural engineer who spent 4 years learning how to build things that don't collapse under pressure. Harold looked at me with something like awe, as if seeing me for the first time. But there would be time for family reckonings later. Right now, my sister, flawed, selfish, but still my sister, was in the hands of a killer, and I was done being anyone's victim. The game Dorothy had started at that intersection was far from over. She thought she'd crushed me like my Honda Civic. She was about to learn that some things, when put under pressure, don't break. They become diamonds. The laptop Morrison provided was a standard police-issue device, but in my hands it became a weapon. My fingers flew across the keyboard despite the IV line taped to my left hand. Years of analyzing structural weaknesses in buildings had taught me to spot vulnerabilities in systems, and Dorothy's plan, while elaborate, had cracks. "What are you doing?" Maria leaned over my shoulder as I pulled up multiple browser windows. Dorothy made a mistake. I explained, navigating to the Illinois probate court's public record system. She knew about my grandmother's inheritance before it was officially filed. That means she either has inside access or she's been monitoring sealed records. Either way, she left a digital footprint. Harold stood frozen by the window, his earlier breakdown giving way to hollow shock. The father who'd orchestrated my entire life around Emma's needs was watching his favored daughter's life hang in the balance because of choices he'd made. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. "Lucy, there's something else," he said, suddenly his voice hoarse. "Dorothy, she mentioned other families, other inheritances. She'd done this before." Morrison's head snapped up from his phone. "What exactly did she say?" "She called it her retirement plan," Harold whispered. "Said she'd spent 30 years watching wealthy families tear each other apart over money. Said it was easy to find the weak links, the overlooked children who were about to inherit. She'd marry into the family, create conflict, uh, then arrange accidents." Morrison finished grimly. He immediately began making calls requesting Dorothy's complete history from every database available. My search had yielded something interesting. 3 weeks ago, someone using a court employee's login had accessed my grandmother's sealed estate files at 2 in the morning. The IP address traced to a coffee shop 6 blocks from Bella Vista Clinic where Emma worked. She was building her plan around Emma's routine, I said, showing Morrison the data, using locations Emma frequented to hide her digital trail. If anyone investigated, it would look like Emma was the mastermind. Sandra Coleman reappeared with 2 security guards. "The transfer ambulance will be here in 20 minutes. We're moving you to a secure wing at St. Mary's." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not running. Dorothy's expecting me to hide or panic. We need to give her what she wants, but on our terms." "Lucy," Maria protested, but I held up my hand. "She wants me to sign over the inheritance. Fine, but inheritance law requires specific procedures. The documents have to be notarized, witnessed, filed with the court. Dorothy might be a criminal, but she needs legal documentation to access that money. That's our window." Morrison was already seeing where I was going. "You want to draw her out." "She has to meet me to get valid signatures," I confirmed. "She can't forge them because the estate lawyers know my signature and any discrepancy would trigger an investigation. She needs me alive and cooperative long enough to sign." My phone buzzed again, another photo. This time Emma was holding a newspaper showing today's date. Her face was swollen from crying, but she was alive. The background showed what looked like an abandoned medical facility, tiles and old equipment visible behind her. 45 minutes, the text read. "The drug Dorothy has prepared takes 30 minutes to kill. Decide fast." Maria grabbed Morrison's arm. "Can your tech people trace that photo? Look for metadata, location markers, anything?" While Morrison's team worked on the photo, I continued my investigation into Dorothy's past. What emerged was a pattern that made my blood run cold. The real Dorothy Winters had died 3 years ago in Nevada. The woman who'd married my father was using a stolen identity, but her methods were familiar. "Detective," I called out, my voice shaking, "I think I found her. Not Dorothy, but who she really is." On my screen was a news article from 5 years ago. "Wealthy widower dies in tragic fall, estate goes to new wife." The accompanying photo showed a woman with brown hair and a petite build. The victim's children had contested the will, claiming their father had been manipulated, but the new wife had vanished before the investigation concluded. Another article 7 years ago. "Businessman's accidental overdose leaves fortune to recent bride." Different hair color, but the same facial structure when you looked closely. Miranda Walsh, Catherine Stone, Diana Merchant. I read from my growing list. She changes names like clothes, but the pattern's always the same. Target a family with inheritance issues, marry the vulnerable parent, eliminate the heir who stands to inherit, collect the money, disappear. "How many?" Morrison asked quietly. I counted the articles, the suspicious deaths, the contested wills. At least 5 that I can find, maybe more. She's been doing this for over a decade. Harold sank into a chair, his face gray. "She told me she understood loss, that she'd been widowed young. I thought I'd found someone who could help me heal after the divorce." The divorce. Something about that nagged at me. "Dad, when exactly did you and Mom divorce?" 6 months ago?" he said automatically, then froze. Wait, that's when Emma started stealing my identity, I finished. The timing isn't coincidence. Dorothy targeted our family specifically. She knew about the inheritance, knew about our dysfunction, orchestrated everything from the beginning. Patricia appeared with a medication cart checking my IV with practiced efficiency. As she worked, she mentioned casually, security just reported something odd. That woman they removed earlier, she left something behind in the pharmacy, a hospital ID badge. Morrison was on it immediately. Whose badge? Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Patricia said. But here's the strange part. Dr. Mitchell died 2 years ago. The badge should have been deactivated and destroyed. A chill ran down my spine. Dorothy had inside help. Someone at this hospital had provided her with a dead doctor's credentials. She could go anywhere, access anything, and security would wave her through. We need to evacuate this floor, Morrison said urgently. If she has Mitchell's badge... The lights flickered. For a second, I thought it was my imagination, the concussion playing tricks. Then they went out, completely plunging the emergency room into darkness. The backup generators kicked in a moment later, casting everything in eerie red emergency lighting. She's here, I whispered. Chaos erupted. Morrison barked orders into his radio, while security guards took defensive positions. Maria gripped my hand so tight it hurt, but I was grateful for the anchor. In the red-tinged darkness, every shadow could be Dorothy. Harold's phone rang, the sound abnormally loud in the tense atmosphere. The caller ID showed Emma's number. Put it on speaker, Morrison ordered. Harold's trembling finger hit the button. Emma's terrified voice filled the room, but it was accompanied by another sound, labored breathing like someone struggling to stay conscious. Lucy? Emma sobbed. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to hurt you. The money, Derek's debts, I was so stupid. Please, Lucy, help me. She injected Derek with something. He's dying. She says you're next if you don't sign the papers. Duh, Emma, where are you? I called out my anger at her, temporarily overwhelmed by fear for her life. I don't know, she wailed. Some old hospital or clinic. There's a sign. Mercy. Something mercy. Lucy, please. I know I don't deserve your help, but... The line went dead. But I'd heard enough. Mercy General, the old hospital on the south side that had been closed for 3 years. I'd driven past it 100 times on my way to work. I know where they are, I said, struggling to sit up despite the pain screaming through my body. Mercy General about 6 miles from here. Morrison was already mobilizing units, but I knew we were running out of time. Derek might be a gambling addict who dragged my sister into this nightmare, but he didn't deserve to die. And Emma, despite everything she'd done, was still my sister. 20 minutes. Another text arrived. Come alone with the paperwork, or watch your sister die the same way Derek is dying now. Room 314, the old surgical wing. Don't test me, Lucy. I've killed smarter women than you. Maria read the text over my shoulder. You're not seriously considering going there. But I was already pulling out my IV, ignoring the sharp sting and the blood that welled up immediately. She won't kill me until she has the signatures. That gives me leverage. Lee. Harold stood, his face twisted with anguish. Lucy, this is my fault. Let me go. Let me try to fix this. You... I turned on him, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. You couldn't even see through her lies when she was sleeping in your bed. You brought this woman into our lives because you were lonely and she flattered your ego. You've spent my entire life sacrificing me for Emma's benefit, and now you want to play hero. Lucy. Maria warned, but I was beyond stopping. No, I continued, my voice rising. Dorothy played you perfectly because you were so easy to play. The neglectful father desperate to matter again. The man who needed to believe a younger woman found him irresistible. You handed her our family's destruction on a silver platter because you couldn't bear to be alone. Harold flinched at each word but didn't deny any of it. How could he? We both knew it was true. Morrison stepped between us. Ms. Winters, I can't let you go to that hospital. It's clearly a trap. Of course it's a trap, I agreed, steadying myself against the bed as a wave of dizziness hit. But Dorothy's made one crucial error. She thinks I'm just another victim, another overlooked daughter desperate to save a family that never valued her. She doesn't know what I really am. And what's that? Morrison asked. I smiled grimly. An engineer who specializes in controlled demolitions. Sometimes the best way to clear the ground for something new is to bring the whole structure down. Lucy, you have a concussion, Maria pleaded. You can barely stand. She was right. My legs felt like water and the room kept tilting at odd angles. But I'd spent my entire life standing when I should have fallen working, when I should have rested giving, when I should have received. One more impossible task wouldn't kill me. Or maybe it would. But Emma was running out of time, and despite everything, the theft, the betrayal, the lifetime of being second best, she was still my sister. The little girl who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, the woman who'd lost her way so completely she'd nearly cost me everything. I need a wire bomb, I told Morrison, and a team positioned around Mercy General. Dorothy wants me alone, but that doesn't mean you can't be close. This is insane, Maria said, but she was already gathering my clothes from the small closet, knowing I'd made up my mind. As I struggled into my blood-stained jeans and torn shirt, Morrison coordinated with his team. Patricia returned with a small device that could be hidden under my clothes, along with a stern lecture about the dangers of leaving against medical advice. Your concussion is severe, she warned. You could have a brain bleed we haven't detected. Leaving now could kill you. Not leaving will definitely kill my sister, I replied, then softer. Thank you for everything. The kindness you showed when I first arrived. It meant more than you know. Patricia squeezed my shoulder gently. Come back alive, honey, both of you. Harold stood by the door, looking lost and broken. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly, not the towering authority figure of my childhood, or the dismissive parent of my adulthood, but a weak man who'd made terrible choices and finally understood their cost. He started, but I cut him off. Save it, I said, but without the earlier venom. If I survive this, we'll talk. Really talk about everything. But right now, I need to save Emma from the consequences of all our mistakes. Maria insisted on driving, despite Morrison's protests about civilian involvement. I'm not letting you face this woman alone, she said firmly. I'll stay in the car, but I'll be close. As we prepared to leave, Morrison pulled me aside. There's something else. We found more information about Dorothy, or whatever her real name is. The FBI has been tracking her for 3 years. She's wanted in connection with 7 murders across 5 states. 7 murders. I was about to walk into an abandoned hospital to face a serial killer who specialized in making deaths look accidental. A woman who'd fooled my father, manipulated my sister, and orchestrated a near-perfect plan to steal millions while eliminating me. But she'd made one mistake. She'd left me alive after the crash. Whatever her phase 2 had been, my survival had forced her to improvise. And improvisation led to errors. One more thing, Morrison added quietly. We found Derek Huang's real name. He's Derek Phelps, and he's Dorothy's son. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just about money. It was a family business passed down from mother to son. Emma hadn't just fallen for the wrong man. She'd been targeted, groomed, and used as a weapon against her own family. As Maria helped me to her car, I looked back at the hospital where I'd nearly died. In a few hours, I'd either be planning my grandmother's estate distribution or joining her in whatever came after this life. But either way, Dorothy's reign of terror ended tonight. Maria's Honda Accord cut through the Chicago night, its headlights sweeping across empty streets as we headed south toward Mercy General. My head throbbed with each heartbeat, and I had to focus on breathing steadily to keep the nausea at bay. The wire Morrison had given me felt heavy against my ribs, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as Dorothy demanded. "Tell me about your grandmother," Maria said suddenly, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. $3.2 million. That's not just savings. That's real money. I leaned my head against the cool window watching the city blur past. Grandma Rose was complicated. She raised me more than my parents did, honestly. When Harold was busy fawning over baby Emma, Grandma Rose taught me to read, to think, to question everything. "But you thought she died poor." "She lived like she was poor," I corrected. "Tiny apartment shopping with coupons, wearing the same coat for 20 years. She used to say wealth wasn't about what you had, but what you didn't waste. I thought it was just Depression-era frugality." My phone buzzed. Morrison's text, "Team in position. Mercy General surrounded. Do not enter until we give signal." Another message followed immediately, this time from the unknown number. 15 minutes. I can see the street from here. Come alone or Emma dies badly. Maria pulled into a parking lot 2 blocks from the abandoned hospital. In the distance, Mercy General loomed like a gothic nightmare, its broken windows staring down at us like dead eyes. The building had been magnificent, once all red brick and ornate stonework. Now it was a casualty of budget cuts and changing neighborhoods, left to rot, while developers circled like vultures. "Lucy, before you go," Maria said, grabbing my arm, "there's something I didn't want to say in front of your father. When I was researching the insurance policies, I found something else. Your grandmother didn't just leave you money. She left you documents. Letters. They're sealed at the law firm handling her estate." "Letters." "The lawyer wouldn't tell me what was in them, but he said Rose insisted they be given to you personally on your 33rd birthday. He seemed unsettled. Said Rose knew things about your family that needed to be revealed at the right time. My grandmother still protecting me from beyond the grave. Still teaching lessons I didn't know I needed to learn." A black SUV pulled up beside us. Agent Franklin from the FBI stepped out, his bulletproof vest visible under his windbreaker. "Ms. Winters, we've got heat signatures in the building. 3 people in room 314, just like she said. 1 signature is prone, hasn't moved in 10 minutes. Derek, dying or already dead. There's a 4th signature 2 floors up," Franklin continued. "We think that's Dorothy watching the approaches. The moment you enter that building, she'll know." "They're good," I said, checking that the wire was secure. "I want her confident. Predators make mistakes when they think they've already won." Franklin handed me a pen. "GPS tracker built in. Click it 3 times if you need immediate extraction. We'll come in hard and fast." "And Emma dies," I said flatly. "Dorothy survived this long because she's smart. She'll have contingencies." "Then what's your plan?" Franklin asked. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd been drafting during the drive. "Dorothy needs my signature to be legal and binding, but there are only certain documents that can transfer inheritance rights. I've prepared papers that look legitimate, but have a fatal flaw. The notary number I'm using belongs to someone who died 6 months ago. Any competent lawyer would catch it in review, but Dorothy's in a hurry. She'll see what she wants to see." Maria laughed despite the tension. "You're gonna con a con artist." "She expects me to be a victim," I said, opening the car door. "Broken, desperate, willing to do anything to save my sister. And I am desperate. But I'm not broken. Not anymore." The walk to Mercy General felt both endless and too short. Every shadow could hide one of Dorothy's accomplices. Every sound made my heart race. The concussion made the world tilt and sway, but I forced myself to walk steadily. Dorothy was watching. Any sign of weakness beyond what she expected could spook her. The hospital's main entrance gaped open its doors, long since stolen for scrap. I stepped into the lobby, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. Moonlight filtered through broken skylights, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and debris-strewn floors. The place smelled of mold and decay, with an undertone of something chemical that made my nose burn. My phone vibrated. "3rd floor surgical wing. Follow the red arrows spray-painted on the walls. Deviate and Emma dies. I found the first red arrow near the collapsed information desk. It pointed toward a stairwell that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. The handrail was rusted, the steps littered with broken glass and used needles. Each floor I climbed felt like ascending into hell. On the third floor, the arrows led me down a corridor lined with empty operating rooms. Old equipment lay scattered like technological bones, and somewhere in the distance I could hear water dripping steadily. The sound was maddening in the silence. Room 314 had its number painted in fresh red paint. I pushed open the door to find a scene that made bile rise in my throat. Emma sat tied to an old wheelchair, duct tape across her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Her left eye was swollen shut, and bruises mottled her arms. Derek lay on a gurney beside her, his skin gray and waxy. Foam had dried at the corners of his mouth, and his chest rose and fell in irregular, gasping breaths. But it was the third figure that made me freeze. A woman stood behind Emma, one hand resting possessively on my sister's shoulder. She wore surgical scrubs and had blonde hair in a neat bun, but nothing else about her matched Harold's description of Dorothy. This woman was tall, athletic, with the kind of face that could blend into any crowd, forgettable except for her eyes. They were the flat, emotionless eyes of a shark. "Lucy," she said warmly, as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. "You're early. I appreciate punctuality." As Dorothy. I managed my voice steadier than I felt. She laughed, a tinkling sound that belonged in a church social, not this chamber of horrors. Dorothy was 3 personas ago, but names don't matter, do they? What matters is resolving our little situation. I stepped closer, fighting the urge to run to Emma. "Let my sister go first, then we'll talk about the money." "No." The warmth vanished from her voice like a switch being flipped. "You seem to think you have leverage here. Let me clarify things." She produced a syringe from her pocket, holding it where I could see the clear liquid inside. Potassium chloride. Injected directly into the heart, it causes immediate cardiac arrest. Very painful, but very quick. Your sister watched me give Derek a diluted dose. Would you like to see what the full concentration does? Emma's muffled screams tore at my heart. I held up my hands in surrender. "No, please, I have the papers. Everything you need to transfer the inheritance." "Show me." I pulled out the documents I'd prepared, hands trembling for real now. Dorothy snatched them, her eyes scanning each line with professional efficiency. For a moment, her expression flickered with satisfaction. "The law firm handling the estate," she said. "What's their verification process?" Standard protocols." I lied smoothly. "They'll need to see the notarized transfer, verify my signature against their files, and confirm I'm acting without duress." "Without duress," Dorothy repeated with amusement. "And how do we handle that little detail?" This was the opening I'd hoped for. "I've already sent them an email saying I'm transferring the funds to Emma as restitution for the hardship she's faced. Family taking care of family. They'll expect this." Dorothy studied me with those shark eyes. "You're being very cooperative for someone who just survived an assassination attempt." "You were right about one thing," I said, letting exhaustion creep into my voice. "I'm tired of being the family sacrifice. Emma took everything from me. My credit, my savings, my peace of mind. Maybe it's time she got what she really wanted." "Lucy, no." Emma's muffled voice was desperate. I turned to her, letting years of genuine resentment show. "You wanted it all, Emma. The attention, the money, the easy life. Congratulations, it's yours." Dorothy's smile was pleased. Sibling rivalry, the most predictable of family weaknesses. "Harold said you'd cave eventually. You always do." "Where is my father?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Safe, for now. He's been very helpful providing passwords and signatures, though I must say his new medication regimen has left him quite manageable." She'd been poisoning him, just like Morrison had revealed about her previous victims. slow, steady, making them compliant while she stripped their assets. Now, Dorothy continued, let's discuss the transfer process. 3.2 million is a substantial sum. It can't all move at once without triggering investigations. This was crucial. I needed her to reveal more of her network, her methods. The FBI was recording everything. How do you usually handle amounts this large? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Carefully, shell companies in the Caymans, cryptocurrency conversions, real estate investments in countries without extradition treaties. Your grandmother was clever to tie the money up in trusts, but every trust has loopholes. And after the transfer, after Dorothy moved closer to Emma, the syringe glinting in the moonlight. After, we all go our separate ways. You'll disappear, a mental breakdown following your accident, perhaps. Emma will tragically overdose, overcome by guilt. Your father will slowly fade away in his grief. Clean, neat, no loose ends. You're going to kill us all anyway, I stated. It wasn't a question. Of course, Dorothy said pleasantly. Did you really think I'd leave witnesses? I've been doing this for 15 years, my dear. No one talks. Ever. Derek groaned on the gurney, his breathing becoming more labored. Dorothy glanced at him with clinical detachment. He's lasting longer than expected. I do admire his constitution. Too bad he inherited his father's gambling addiction instead of my business acumen. Derek is your son. I needed her to confirm it for the recording. Stepson, technically, his father was husband number 2. Weak man, but his insurance payout funded my early operations. Derek's been useful for finding marks. Young women with family money are surprisingly willing to overlook red flags when the man is charming enough. Emma made a sound of pure anguish through her gag. The full scope of her manipulation was finally clear. She'd been targeted from the beginning, seduced by a man whose mother specialized in murdering heirs. Sign the papers, Dorothy ordered, producing an official notary stamp. I'll handle the seal. I took the pen, my hand hovering over the signature line. This was it. Once I signed, even with the flawed notary number, Dorothy would believe she'd won. She'd relax her guard, maybe enough for the FBI to move in safely. There's just one problem, I said quietly. Dorothy's hand tightened on the syringe. Don't test me. I'm not testing you, I'm informing you. Rose Winters didn't leave $3.2 million. She left something much more valuable. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Dorothy's face. What are you talking about? My grandmother spent 50 years as a forensic accountant for the IRS. I continued, signing my name with a flourish. She specialized in tracking hidden assets, uncovering fraud, following money through shell companies, and fake identities. She was very, very good at her job. But Dorothy's voice had lost some of its confidence. So she recognized patterns, suspicious deaths among wealthy families, inheritance frauds that were never quite prosecuted. She started keeping files, building a database, names, dates, methods. She knew someone was hunting heirs, turning family dysfunction into profit. I slid the signed papers across to Dorothy, who grabbed them with greedy fingers. You're stalling! No, I said calmly. I'm explaining why my grandmother's real inheritance isn't money. It's information. 15 years of your murders documented and cross-referenced. Every identity you've used, every family you've destroyed. She knew you'd come for us eventually. The money was just bait. Dorothy went very still. You're lying. The letters Maria mentioned, I smiled coldly. They're not letters. They're sealed indictments, prepared by a woman who spent 5 decades catching criminals exactly like you. She knew about our family's weakness, knew Emma would be an easy target, so she prepared a trap that would spring the moment someone tried to steal an inheritance that was never just about money. Even if that's true, Dorothy said, but her hand was trembling now. I have your sister, your father. You'll call off whatever. Did you know, I interrupted, that when you inject potassium chloride subcutaneously instead of intravenously, it creates a very different effect. Derek isn't dying from cardiac arrest. He's dying from respiratory paralysis. Much slower, much more traceable. Every move you've made tonight has been recorded, documented, and transmitted to people who've been hunting you for years. Dorothy lunged for Emma with the syringe, but I was ready. The pen Franklin had given me was more than a GPS tracker. 3 clicks and a high-voltage shock deployed from the tip. Dorothy convulsed and dropped the syringe, rolling harmlessly away. The room exploded with motion as FBI agents burst through every entrance. Dorothy tried to rise, but Agent Franklin was on her in seconds, cuffs clicking around her wrists as he read her rights. "Melissa Crawford," he said with satisfaction, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of murder, fraud, and conspiracy. We've been waiting a long time for this." Melissa Crawford, her real name, or at least one of them. The woman who'd played my family like a symphony of dysfunction, was just another criminal with delusions of grandeur. I rushed to Emma, pulling the tape from her mouth as gently as I could. She sobbed against my shoulder, apologies pouring out in an incoherent stream. "The money," she gasped. "Lucy, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought Derek loved me. I thought if I could just pay off his debts." "Shh," I soothed, holding her. "Despite everything, we'll figure it out. We'll fix this." Paramedics swarmed Derek, working to stabilize him. Whatever Dorothy had given him, it wasn't immediately fatal. He'd live to face justice alongside his stepmother. "Your grandmother," Morrison said, appearing at my elbow with a look of profound respect. "The files she compiled are real." I smiled tiredly. Rose Winters was many things, but she was never anybody's fool. Check with the FBI's cold case division. I think you'll find she's been feeding them information for years under the alias Midwest Rose. "How did you know?" "I didn't. Not for sure. But Grandma Rose taught me that the best way to catch a predator is to make them think they're the hunter, right up until the trap springs shut." Dorothy was so focused on the money she never questioned why it was so easy to find. Emma pulled back to look at me, her face a mess of tears and bruises. "After everything I did to you, you still came." "You're my sister," I said simply. "That doesn't excuse what you did. We have a lot to work through, maybe more than we can fix, but I wasn't going to let her kill you." "Your father's at Chicago Memorial," Franklin reported. "He's been admitted for poisoning, antifreeze in his coffee just like the others. He'll recover, but it was close. Harold would live. Whether our relationship would survive was another question entirely, but that was tomorrow's problem." "Lucy," Morrison said quietly, "we need to get you back to the hospital. You're swaying on your feet, and that head wound is bleeding again." He was right. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind pain that threatened to buckle my knees. Maria appeared as if summoned, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Come on, hero," she said. "Let's get you patched up, again." As we left that room of horrors, I looked back one last time. Dorothy Melissa sat in custody, her shark eyes finally showing emotion rage at being outsmarted. Emma was on a stretcher being treated for shock and minor injuries. Derek was unconscious but breathing steadily. The sins of our family had almost destroyed us. Favoritism, greed, jealousy, and betrayal had created the perfect storm for a predator like Dorothy to exploit. But we'd survived, scarred, broken in places, but alive. And somewhere I was certain Rose Winters was smiling. The ride back to Columbia General passed in a blur of sirens and Maria's worried voice asking me questions I couldn't quite process. The adrenaline crash hit hard, leaving me shaking and nauseated. Every bump in the road sent lightning through my skull, and I had to close my eyes against the spinning lights of the city. "Stay awake, Lucy," Maria commanded, squeezing my hand. "The paramedics said you need to stay conscious." I'm awake," I mumbled, though keeping my eyes open felt like lifting weights. "Just processing." "Processing?" Maria laughed, but it was shaky with relief. You just faced down a serial killer with a concussion and a GPS pen. What's there to process? Everything I thought but didn't say. The image of Emma's terrified face, Derek's gray skin, Dorothy's shark eyes, the weight of my grandmother's real legacy, not money but justice served cold after years of preparation. At the hospital, the same emergency room staff who'd treated me hours earlier descended like a concerned swarm. Patricia, the kind nurse from before, actually tears in her eyes as she helped transfer me to a bed. When you left against medical advice, we thought. She trailed off, adjusting my IV with practiced hands. Well, we're just glad you're back. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, was less sentimental. You have a subdural hematoma, he announced after reviewing my new scans. Minor, but it could have killed you if you'd taken another blow to the head. What were you thinking? I was thinking my sister was about to die, I replied, and I was right. He shook his head, but ordered treatment rather than lectures. As nurses bustled around me, Agent Franklin appeared in the doorway, his expression grave despite the victory we'd just achieved. Ms. Winters, I need to speak with you about what we found at Mercy General, he said. Privately, if possible. Maria started to protest, but I waved her off. It's okay, stay please. After tonight, no more secrets. Franklin pulled up a chair, his FBI windbreaker still dusty from the abandoned hospital. We found more than we expected in that building. Dorothy Melissa Crawford had been using it as a base for weeks. There's evidence of at least 3 other victims who weren't as lucky as you. My stomach clenched. Within the last 6 months. We're still identifying the bodies, but... He pulled out a tablet showing me photos of personal effects. Do any of these look familiar? I studied the images. Jewelry, wallets, identification cards, all belonging to women between 25 and 40, all with that quality I recognized from my own life, the overlooked daughters, the responsible ones, the family members who gave more than they got. This one, I said, pointing to a simple gold necklace. Sarah Chen. She was in a support group I attended briefly after Emma's identity theft. Her younger brother had drained their parents' retirement savings. She was trying to rebuild their finances when she disappeared. Her family said she had a breakdown and left town. She never left Chicago, Franklin said quietly. We found her in the basement, along with 2 others who match similar patterns, women dealing with family financial crises who suddenly vanished. The scope of Dorothy's operation was staggering. She hadn't just targeted wealthy families for inheritance fraud. She'd been systematically hunting vulnerable women using their family dysfunction as cover for murder. Your grandmother knew, Franklin continued. We've been in contact with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Rose Winters had been feeding them information for over a decade under various aliases. She tracked Melissa Crawford through 5 states and 12 identities. But why didn't she turn her in directly, Mariah asked. Why set a trap using her own family? Franklin's expression grew thoughtful. According to the files, Rose tried, but Crawford was too careful, too connected. She had allies in various police departments, people she'd paid off or blackmailed. Every time law enforcement got close, someone would tip her off. Rose realized the only way to catch her was to make her overconfident, to let her think she was in control. So she used us as bait, I said, the truth bitter in my mouth. Knowing our family was exactly the kind of dysfunction Dorothy exploited. Your grandmother left detailed instructions, Franklin said, producing a sealed envelope. This was in her safety deposit box to be delivered to you if anything happened before your 33rd birthday. I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written across it in Grandma Rose's precise script. Inside a single page in her handwriting, if you're reading this, then the trap has been sprung and you face the devil I've been tracking for so long. I'm sorry. A grandmother should protect her granddaughter, not use her as bait. But you were the only one I could trust to be strong enough, smart enough, and good enough to survive what was coming. I've watched you your entire life, seen how Harold's favoritism toward Emma shaped you both. It broke my heart, but it also forged you into someone remarkable, someone who could give without taking sacrifice, without bitterness, love without conditions. These qualities made you vulnerable to predators like Melissa Crawford, but they also made you the perfect weapon against her. She counts on family dysfunction, on siblings who hate each other too much to unite. She never imagined sisters who could forgive, who could choose love over justified anger. That's why you won. Not because of my files or the FBI's surveillance, but because you did what she thought impossible. You saved Emma despite having every reason to let her burn. The money is real, my dear one. 3.2 million earned through decades of careful investment and ironclad trusts that even Harold couldn't touch. It's yours, along with something more valuable, the knowledge that you broke the cycle. Harold failed you just as his father failed him, but you chose differently. You chose to be the person Emma needed, even when she didn't deserve it. Use the money wisely. Help other women escape the traps of family dysfunction and financial predation. Build something beautiful from the ashes of what nearly destroyed you. And remember, the greatest inheritance I leave you isn't wealth or justice, but the proof that love can triumph over even the most calculated evil. All my love, Rose. I read it twice before the tears came. Not the gentle tears of sentiment, but the ugly, body-shaking sobs of someone who'd held too much for too long. Mariah held me while I cried for the grandmother who'd loved me enough to put me in danger to save me, for the sister who'd nearly killed me in her desperate selfishness, for the father who'd never seen me as more than a resource to be exploited, for all the women in those photographs who hadn't been lucky enough to have a Rose Winters watching over them. "There's more," Franklin said gently when my tears finally slowed. "We've been analyzing the recording from your wire. Crawford made several admissions that link her to cases in other states. With Derek's testimony, he's agreed to cooperate fully. We'll be able to close investigations that have been cold for years." "What about Emma?" I asked. "She committed identity theft fraud." "The prosecutor's office is willing to consider her a victim," Franklin said. "She was specifically targeted and groomed by Crawford's operation. With restitution and cooperation, she might avoid jail time." Restitution. With what money everything Emma had stolen had gone to Derek's fake debts funneled into Dorothy's accounts. My sister was broken and facing charges that could destroy what was left of her life. "I'll cover her restitution," I heard myself say. Maria made a sound of protest, but I continued. "From the inheritance. Grandma Rose said to use it to help women escape financial predation. Emma was a predator, yes, but she was also prey. Both things can be true." Franklin nodded slowly. "That's remarkably generous considering." "It's not generosity," I corrected. "It's strategy. Emma needs therapy, not prison. She needs to understand how she was manipulated while also taking responsibility for her choices. Prison won't give her that." A knock interrupted us. Harold stood in the doorway looking like he'd aged a decade in the hours since I'd last seen him. He was in a hospital gown, an IV port visible on his hand where they'd been flushing the antifreeze from his system. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from the poisoning or tears I couldn't tell. "Lucy," he said, his voice hoarse, "they told me what you did. How you saved Emma. How you figured out Dorothy's plan. Don't," I said quietly. "Not yet. You're sick, I'm injured, and there's too much to say. Rest. Recover. Then we'll talk about why you were so ready to believe I should die for Emma's mistakes." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "I never wanted you dead. I thought if you disappeared for a while, started fresh." "You thought wrong." I cut him off. "You've been thinking wrong my entire life, but this isn't the time or place for that conversation." Harold looked like he wanted to argue to defend himself, but something in my expression stopped him. Maybe he finally saw me clearly, not as the dutiful daughter who would always sacrifice for the family, but as the woman who'd walked into a killer's trap to save a sister who'd betrayed her, the woman who'd survived what he'd blindly helped orchestrate. "I'll go," he said finally, "but Lucy, for what it's worth, I'm sorry for all of it." After he left, Maria squeezed my hand. "You don't have to forgive him or Emma. Surviving this doesn't obligate you to forget what they did." "I know," I said, "but holding on to anger takes energy I need for other things, like making sure no other woman goes through what those victims did." Franklin stood to leave. "We'll need your full statement tomorrow, but rest for now. You've done more than enough." As he reached the door, I called out, "Agent Franklin, what happens to Dorothy now?" "Melissa Crawford will never see freedom again," he assured me. 7 states want to prosecute her for murder. Even with plea deals, she's looking at multiple life sentences. After he left, I lay back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling at me like an undertow. But my phone buzzed with one last message of the night. This time, it was from Emma. "Lucy, they told me what you did, what you risked. I don't have words. I know sorry isn't enough. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I heard everything she said about choosing me because I was weak, selfish, easy to manipulate. She was right, but I don't want to be that person anymore. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I want to earn the second chance you've given me. I love you. I've always loved you. I just forgot how to show it. Emma." I didn't respond. There would be time for those conversations later when the wounds weren't so fresh and the betrayals didn't sting with every breath. But I saved the message. Hope for reconciliation was its own kind of inheritance, and even the smallest seed might grow into something worthwhile. Maria settled into the chair beside my bed, making it clear she wasn't going anywhere. "So what now?" I considered the question. "Now I heal, file insurance claims, set up the foundation Grandma Rose wanted. Make sure Harold actually gets help instead of just taking whatever wife number 3 gives him. Try to rebuild some kind of relationship with Emma. Figure out how to live without constantly sacrificing myself for people who don't appreciate it." "That's a lot," Maria observed. "Yes," I agreed, "but I've got $3.2 million and a really good lawyer. I think I can manage." She laughed, the sound bright in the sterile room. Outside, Chicago went on with its nighttime rhythms, unaware that a predator had been caught and a cycle of violence broken. Tomorrow would bring police statements and legal procedures, difficult conversations, and harder choices. But tonight, I was alive. Emma was alive. Even Harold, poisoned and pathetic, was alive. Dorothy's calculated evil had failed against something she never understood, the messy, complicated, painful love of family. Not the family we deserved or the family we wanted, but the family we had. It wasn't perfect, it might never be good, but it was ours and we'd survived. For now, that was enough. The next 48 hours passed in a whirlwind of medical treatments, police interviews, and legal consultations. My subdural hematoma responded well to treatment, though Dr. Martinez insisted on keeping me for observation. The constant monitoring felt suffocating after everything I'd survived, but Maria wouldn't hear of me checking out early. "You literally walked into a serial killer's trap with a brain bleed," she reminded me for the 10th time, adjusting my blankets like a mother hen. "You're staying put until the doctors clear you." It was during one of these enforced rest periods that Emma appeared in my doorway. She looked nothing like the polished Instagram version of herself I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a simple sweater and jeans. The careful makeup was gone, revealing exhaustion and fading bruises. Her hands trembled as she clutched a manila folder to her chest. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Maria started to object, but I waved her back. "It's okay. Give us a few minutes." My best friend looked between Emma and me, clearly reluctant. "I'll be right outside. If you need anything—" "I'll call," I assured her. After Maria left, Emma stood frozen by the door as if afraid to come closer. For the first time in years, I really looked at my younger sister. Past the entitled princess facade Harold had cultivated, past the Instagram filters and designer accessories, to the frightened woman underneath. Sit, I said, gesturing to the chair Maria had vacated. You look like you're about to collapse. Emma moved cautiously, as if expecting me to change my mind. When she finally sat, tears were already streaming down her face. I don't know how to start, she whispered. There's so much to say, and none of it's enough. Then don't start with words, I suggested. Start with that folder. What did you bring? She placed it on my bed with shaking hands. Inside were documents, bank statements, credit card receipts, loan applications, a comprehensive record of every dollar she'd stolen, every account she'd opened in my name, every financial crime she'd committed. I spent all night pulling this together, she explained. Every transaction, every penny. I thought, if I could show you exactly what I took, we could figure out how to fix it. I flipped through the pages, my stomach sinking at the total, nearly $80,000 over 6 months. My entire life savings, plus debt I'd never agreed to. Emma, this is evidence of multiple felonies. I know. She met my eyes for the first time. Agent Franklin said I have to make full restitution to avoid prison. But Lucy, I swear I didn't know about the murder plot. Dorothy and Derek, they told me you'd get the inheritance money and it would all work out. They said you'd never even miss what I took because you'd be so rich. And you believed that. I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. You thought stealing my identity was okay because I might inherit money later. No, Emma's voice cracked. I mean, yes, I told myself that, but Lucy, I need to tell you something about Derek, about how this all really started. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to older messages. These are from 8 months ago, right after I met him. Look at how he talked to me. I read the text with growing unease. Derek's initial messages were textbook love bombing, excessive compliments, constant attention declarations of feelings that came too fast. But there was something else, a subtle manipulation I recognized from Dorothy's playbook. See this one. Emma pointed to a message. He's asking about my family, but specifically about siblings. Whether we're close, who handles finances, who makes decisions. I thought he was just interested in my life. He was interviewing you, I realized, looking for the right victim profile. Emma nodded miserably. He knew exactly what to say, how Harold always preferred me but never really respected me, how I felt guilty about the favoritism but also entitled to it. He played on every insecurity, every character flaw. Within 2 months, I was completely dependent on him emotionally. That doesn't excuse. I'm not trying to excuse it. Emma interrupted, then caught herself. Sorry, I know it doesn't excuse anything, but I need you to understand how it happened. The gambling debts started small, a few hundred here, 1,000 there, always with promises that the next big win would cover everything. He'd cry, threaten to hurt himself if I didn't help, say his creditors would kill him. So you decided to destroy my life instead. Emma flinched. The first time I used your information, I was just going to take a small loan, $2,000. I planned to pay it back before you noticed, but Derek found out what I'd done and changed. He said I'd committed fraud, that I could go to prison. He had evidence, screenshots, recordings. Suddenly, I wasn't his girlfriend anymore. I was his accomplice. The pattern was sickeningly clear. Dorothy might have been the mastermind, but Derek had inherited her talent for psychological manipulation. They'd turned Emma from a selfish but relatively harmless person into a weapon aimed at her own family. When did you find out he was Dorothy's son? I asked. Last night when she said it. Emma's voice was barely audible. I thought he was just some guy with a gambling problem. Finding out it was all planned, that I was targeted from the beginning. Lucy, I feel like such a fool. You were a fool, Renai said bluntly, a selfish, entitled fool who was so used to getting everything that you couldn't imagine consequences. But you were also a victim. Both things can be true. Emma looked up with red-rimmed eyes. How can you be so calm about this? I destroyed your credit, your savings, your sense of security. I nearly got you killed. I'm not calm, I admitted. I'm furious, hurt beyond words. Part of me wants to let you face every consequence, go to prison, learn the hard way what your choices cost. But, I thought about Grandma Rose's letter about breaking cycles and choosing love over justified anger. But I also remember you at 5 years old crawling into my bed during thunderstorms. You at 10 crying because the mean girls at school said you were too pretty to be smart. You at 16 calling me drunk from a party because you were scared to call Dad. You always came, Emma whispered. Every time I called, you came. Because that's what big sisters do, I said. Even when their little sisters grow up to be entitled brats who steal their identities. Emma laughed through her tears, a broken sound. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You're right, you don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't the point. The point is deciding whether you're worth salvaging. Am I... The question came out so small, so vulnerable, it could have been asked by the 5-year-old seeking shelter from storms. Before I could answer, there was a commotion in the hallway, raised voices including Maria's, and then Derek Velps was shoved into view by 2 FBI agents. He was in custody chains, his pretty boy face marred by the pallor of someone coming down from Dorothy's poison. But his eyes, when they found Emma, still held that calculated charm. Baby, he called out. Tell them it wasn't my fault. Tell them how she forced us both. Emma stood slowly turning to face the man who'd systematically destroyed her life. I watched her shoulders straighten, saw something harden in her expression. You knew, she said quietly. From the beginning, you knew who I was, what you were doing. Every sweet word was a lie. Every promise was bait. Emma, don't be like this, Derek wheedled. We were both victims. My stepmother, she's crazy. She threatened me too. We can get through this together. No. Emma's voice grew stronger. We're nothing together. You're just a pathetic man who preys on lonely women because you're too weak to build anything real. Your stepmother might be a monster, but you chose to be her weapon. Derek's facade cracked. You stupid bitch. You think you matter. You were just another mark, easier than most because you were already a selfish little princess. All I had to do was tell you what you wanted to hear. Get him out of here, Agent Franklin ordered. As the agents dragged Derek away, he shouted more abuse each word, stripping away another layer of the illusion Emma had clung to. When silence returned, Emma sank back into the chair, looking oddly lighter despite the tears on her face. I needed to see that, she said. The real him, not the version I created in my head. That took courage, I acknowledged. No courage is what you did, walking into that hospital knowing it was a trap. Emma pulled out another document from her folder. I've been in touch with a therapist who specializes in victims of romantic manipulation. I start tomorrow, twice a week, sessions plus group therapy. That's good, Emma, really good. I also called that credit repair company you used. They said with the FBI documentation proving I was at part of a larger fraud scheme, they might be able to expedite clearing your records. And I've already started the paperwork to legally transfer any accounts or loans back to my name. I studied my sister, looking for signs of the performance she'd perfected over years of being Harold's golden child. But this felt different. Real. There's something else. Emma continued, pulling out a job application. The therapist knows a non-profit that helps identity theft victims. They're looking for someone to do intake calls, help other victims navigate the system. The pay is terrible, but it's honest work, I finished, and it might help you understand the damage from the other side. Exactly. She met my eyes again. Lucy, I know I can't undo what I did. I know you might never trust me again, but I want to try to be someone worth forgiving, even if you never actually forgive me. A knock interrupted us. Patricia, the nurse, entered with my medication, pausing when she saw Emma. Should I come back? No, we're finishing up, I said. To Emma, I added, leave the folder. I'll review everything and have Maria help figure out a restitution plan that won't destroy you financially. But the inheritance is mine to use as I see fit, I interrupted. Grandma Rose wanted me to help women recovering from financial predation. Turns out that includes you, but Emma. This is your only chance. No more lies, no more shortcuts, no more expecting others to clean up your messes. You do the work, or we're done. Emma stood clutching her purse like a lifeline. I understand. And Lucy, that woman Dorothy, or Melissa, or whoever she really is, she was wrong about us. She said siblings who hate each other can't unite. But we don't hate each other. I might have acted like it might have been the worst sister imaginable, but I never hated you. I was just too selfish to show love properly. Love without action is just manipulation. I said the words coming from some deep place of hard-won wisdom. Start showing it through choices, not words. She nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're my sister, even if I never gave you a reason to be glad I'm yours. After she left, Patricia administered my medication with gentle efficiency. That looked intense. My family specializes in intense, I admitted. Maria returned moments later, her expression wary. Did she upset you? I saw Derek in the hallway and thought, she's trying, I said simply. Whether she'll succeed is another question, but she's trying. Mariah settled back into her chair, pulling out her laptop. Well, while you were having sister therapy, I've been working with the estate lawyers. Your grandmother's money is clear and available. The FBI cleared it as unconnected to Dorothy's schemes. Also, there's something else you need to see. She showed me an email from a major newspaper. They wanted to interview me about surviving Dorothy's plot, about the role of family dysfunction in financial crimes. There were also messages from 3 publishers interested in my story, and a documentary producer who'd already optioned 2 of Dorothy's previous victim stories. You could turn this into something bigger, Maria suggested. Use the platform to help other women recognize the signs. I thought about the photos Agent Franklin had shown me, the women who hadn't survived Dorothy's schemes. Sarah Chen with her simple gold necklace and family burdens too heavy to bear. The others unnamed but not forgotten who died because they were responsible in irresponsible families. Oiche set up the interviews, I decided, but any money from this goes into the foundation. We're going to call it the Rose Winters Fund for Financial Justice. Grandma would have liked that. Maria smiled. She would have loved it. Practical help with a side of righteousness. Very Rose. As the medication began to take effect, making the world pleasantly fuzzy around the edges, I thought about cycles and choices. Harold had chosen favoritism, creating the dynamic Dorothy exploited. Emma had chosen selfishness, becoming the perfect weapon. I'd chosen sacrifice, nearly becoming the perfect victim. But in the end, we'd all chosen something else. Harold chose to testify against the woman he'd brought into our lives. Emma chose to face her victim and her victimizer. I chose to save instead of abandon. Dorothy had bet everything on our dysfunction. She'd lost because she couldn't imagine we might choose to be better than our worst selves. It wasn't redemption, not yet. Maybe not ever, but it was a beginning. The next morning arrived with unexpected clarity. My head still ached, but the fog of concussion had lifted enough for me to think strategically. Dr. Martinez ran through another battery of tests, finally declaring me stable enough for limited activity, which I chose to interpret liberally. I need a secure phone and a laptop, I told Agent Franklin when he arrived for my official statement. Dorothy made this personal. I want to return the favor. Franklin raised an eyebrow. Ms. Winters, the FBI has protocols. The FBI has been chasing her for 7 years without success, I interrupted. I caught her in one night. Maybe it's time to try something different. Maria, who had spent the night researching on her laptop, looked up with interest. What are you thinking? Dorothy's whole strategy relies on exploiting family dysfunction. She finds the cracks and wedges them open until everything falls apart. But she made a mistake with us. I pulled myself up straighter in the bed, ignoring the protest from my ribs. She didn't account for what happens when dysfunctional families decide to function. Franklin pulled out his official recorder. I'm listening. Oh, first we need Harold here and Emma. Dorothy's been playing us against each other using our resentments and failures. Time to flip the script. Within an hour, my hospital room had transformed into an improvised war room. Harold sat in the corner, still pale from the antifreeze poisoning, but alert. Emma perched nervously on a chair, clutching a cup of coffee like a shield. Maria had commandeered a rolling table for her laptop and legal documents. Franklin and two other agents occupied the remaining space. Dorothy's real name is Melissa Crawford. Franklin began projecting images onto the wall. Age 57, originally from Newark. Started her career as a legitimate nurse, lost her license in 2009 for stealing patient medications. That's when she turned to fraud, I guessed. Precisely. Her first victim was her own mother-in-law, who died of an apparent heart attack 3 months after changing her will. From there, the pattern escalated. I studied the photos of Dorothy's various identities: blonde, brunette, redhead, young, professional, middle-aged, romantic, grieving widow. She was a chameleon, becoming whatever her targets needed to see. What's her weakness, I asked. Everyone has one. Pride, Harold said suddenly. We all turned to look at him. She couldn't resist telling me how smart she was, how easy we were to manipulate. She kept score like it was a game. Emma nodded slowly. Derek was the same way. He'd brag about his conquests, as he called them. Other women he'd fooled. It was like he needed me to know how special he was. Narcissistic personality disorder, Maria said, pulling up psychological profiles. Common in long-term con artists. They need admiration even from their victims. An idea began forming. Agent Franklin, is Dorothy talking? Her lawyer shut down all questioning. She's claiming everything was Derek's idea, that she was just trying to help her stepson. Of course she is. I swung my legs out of bed, testing my balance. But she's in custody, which means she's not in control. For someone like her, that must be unbearable. What are you proposing? I moved to Maria's laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard despite the IV still attached to my hand. We give her what she wants. Attention, admiration, a chance to prove she's the smartest person in the room. But we do it on our terms. Lucy, Harold said hesitantly, what are you doing? Something I learned from Grandma Rose. I replied, pulling up the FBI's files on Dorothy's past crimes. The best way to catch someone who thinks they're playing chess is to let them believe you're playing checkers. I drafted an email to Dorothy's lawyer, CCing the prosecutor. The subject line read, "Exclusive interview request, the woman who outsmarted the Winters family." Maria read over my shoulder. You're offering her a platform. I'm offering her rope, I corrected, enough to hang herself with. Franklin looked skeptical. Her lawyer will never allow it. He will if we frame it right. Dorothy's facing life in prison. Multiple states want to prosecute. Her only chance at leniency is to appear sympathetic, misunderstood. A woman driven to extremes by circumstances. What better way than a heartfelt interview with one of her victims? You want to interview the woman who tried to kill you? Harold's voice was strained. No, I said, meeting his eyes. We want to interview her, the whole family, show the world how she exploited our weaknesses, turned us against each other. Make her explain in detail how brilliant her plan was. Emma caught on first. You want her to confess without realizing it. Appeal to her ego. Exactly. But more than that, I want her to reveal her network. Dorothy didn't work alone for 15 years. She had help people who provided fake IDs, who helped move money, who covered up deaths. If we can get her talking about her methods, bragging about her intelligence, we might uncover the entire operation. Franklin finished, a slow smile spreading across his face. It's unorthodox, but it might work. Harold shifted uncomfortably. You want me to face her after what she did? I want you to face yourself, I said bluntly. This only works if we're honest about how she got to us. Your favoritism, Emma's entitlement, my enabling, we put it all on the table. The prosecutor won't like this, Franklin warned. If she says anything that could be construed as coerced or entrapped, that's why we do it through her lawyer with full documentation. Present it as her chance to tell her side of the story. Humanize herself before sentencing. I pulled up statistics on sentencing disparities. Women who appear remorseful, who can explain their actions as responses to trauma or desperation, receive sentences averaging 30% lighter. Her lawyer will see the opportunity. Maria was already drafting legal frameworks. We'd need signed agreements from all parties, full disclosure that anything said can be used in court, Miranda warnings in triplicate. What about Derek? Emma asked quietly. He knows things about her operation, maybe more than she realizes. Franklin nodded thoughtfully. He's been trying to cut a deal, claims he was abused by Dorothy, forced into the family business. Typical deflection, but he might be willing to provide information if he thinks it'll help his case. Set up a meeting, I decided. Let me talk to him. Absolutely not, Maria protested. Lucy, you've been out of the hospital for exactly 0 minutes. You can't go running around interrogating criminals. Then bring him here, I countered. Hospital, security, FBI, supervision. Make it part of his cooperation agreement. Franklin looked like he wanted to argue, but pulled out his phone instead. I'll see what I can arrange. As he stepped out to make calls, I turned to my family. This is our chance to rewrite the narrative, not as victims, but as survivors who fought back. But it only works if we're united. No more secrets, no more protecting egos. Can you do that? Harold looked at Emma, then at me. Something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. I've lost everything that mattered by keeping secrets, he said quietly. My marriage, my daughter's trust, nearly your lives. Yes, I can do this. Emma squared her shoulders. I've been the villain in this story. Maybe it's time I helped write a different ending. Maria clapped her hands once all business. All right then, let's catch ourselves a serial killer. The email to Dorothy's lawyer was sent within the hour. Franklin arranged for Derek to be brought to the hospital that afternoon. The pieces of our counterattack were falling into place, but I knew the real challenge would be maintaining our united front when faced with the people who'd nearly destroyed us. As the morning wore on, something shifted in the room. The awkward tension between Harold, Emma, and me didn't disappear, but it transformed into something purposeful. We were still a broken family, but we were choosing to be broken together rather than letting others shatter us apart. Lucy, Harold said during a quiet moment. What you're doing, it's what Rose would have done, turn disaster into justice. Grandma Rose started this, I replied. We're just finishing it. No, he corrected softly. You're finishing it. Emma and I were just trying to earn the right to stand beside you. It was the first completely honest thing my father had said to me in years, maybe ever. And while it didn't erase the past, it suggested the possibility of a different future. Dorothy thought she'd found the perfect victims in the Winters family. She was about to learn that sometimes the perfect victims make the most dangerous adversaries. Derek Phelps looked smaller in custody orange. The designer clothes and carefully styled hair that had helped him seduce my sister were gone, replaced by standard-issue jail wear and days-old stubble. His hands were cuffed to the table in the hospital's secure conference room, 2 FBI agents flanking him like stone guardians. Hello, Derek, I said, settling carefully into the chair across from him. My ribs protested the movement, but I kept my expression neutral. Never show weakness to a predator. His eyes darted between Emma and me, calculating which approach might save him. Lucy, I'm glad you're okay. What happened at that intersection was terrible. I had no idea Dorothy was planning. Stop, I said quietly. "We have the text messages from Dorothy's phone. We know you were tracking my location. We know you fed her my schedule. So let's skip the innocent act and talk about what you can offer to reduce your sentence from attempted murder to conspiracy." Derek's mask slipped, revealing the cunning underneath. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Agent Franklin said, activating the recording equipment. "Start with how you and Dorothy select targets." Derek glanced at his lawyer, who nodded. "Dorothy had databases," he began reluctantly. "Genealogy sites, obituary notices, court records. She'd track families with substantial inheritances, then look for dysfunction. Divorce filings, restraining orders, bankruptcy, anything suggesting conflict." "And then," I prompted. "Then she'd send me in. Young women with family money were my specialty. I'd hang around places they frequented, coffee shops, near their work gyms, therapy groups." Therapy groups. Emma's voice was sharp with recognition. Derek had the grace to look ashamed. Easiest hunting ground. Women already talking about their problems, their vulnerabilities. I joined 6 different groups over 2 years. Gambling addiction, codependency, grief counseling. Learned their language, their patterns. My stomach churned thinking of all the vulnerable women he'd stalked under the guise of seeking help. "How many, Derek? How many women did you target?" 15, maybe 20, but I only succeeded with 4 who had real money." He looked at Emma with something that might have been regret if sociopaths were capable of it. "You were supposed to be number 5. "Supposed to be." Franklin leaned forward. "Dorothy got impatient. Usually we'd take months, even years. Build trust, create dependency, then slowly introduce financial pressure. But with Emma, Dorothy pushed for acceleration. Said the grandmother's inheritance was too big to wait for." I exchanged glances with Franklin. She knew about the inheritance before my grandmother died. Derek nodded. "Dorothy had someone at the probate court. Not sure who, but they fed her information about pending estates. Your grandmother's will was filed under seal 6 months before her death. Standard procedure for large estates, but Dorothy's contact leaked it." "Name," Franklin demanded. "Who's the contact?" "I don't know. Dorothy compartmentalized everything. I only knew my part." "Which was," I asked. "Seduce the vulnerable sister. Create financial pressure. Push her to desperation." He looked at Emma again. "You were actually harder than most. Kept talking about your sister, how she'd help if you asked. Most marks hate their families too much to consider that." Emma's hands clenched on the table. "So you isolated me, convinced me Lucy would judge me, hate me, never forgive me." Standard protocol," Derek admitted. "Isolation breeds desperation. Desperation leads to bad choices." "Like identity theft," I said. "Dorothy's idea said if we could destroy your credit, make you financially vulnerable, the truck accident would look like suicide. Desperate woman with no money, no options, takes a permanent way out." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. They'd planned my psychological destruction as carefully as my physical death. "Tell us about the others," Franklin pressed, "the women who weren't as lucky as Lucy." Derek's facade cracked further. "I don't know details. Dorothy handled the final stages. I'd create the pressure, introduce the financial crisis, then she'd step in as the solution. The helpful new friend, the understanding employer, the sympathetic nurse." "Sarah Chen," I said. "Did you target her?" Something flickered in Derek's eyes. "The support group leader. Yeah, I remember her. Smart woman. Saw through me pretty quick, actually. Started warning others about me." "So Dorothy killed her," I stated flatly. "I don't know anything about that," Derek said quickly, but his eyes told a different story. Franklin produced a photo of Sarah's necklace, the one found at Mercy General. "This look familiar?" Derek paled. "I want immunity for this part." "No immunity for murder," Franklin said firmly, "but cooperation might keep you off death row." Derek's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. After a moment, Derek continued. "Sarah figured out I was using a fake name in the support group. She did background checks, found out about my record. She was going to expose me to everyone." So, I prompted when he paused. So I told Dorothy, said our whole operation was at risk. Next thing I knew, Sarah missed a meeting, then another. Group leader said she'd had a family emergency, left town, but you knew better. Dorothy had Sarah's necklace, wore it once when she thought I wasn't paying attention, like a trophy. Emma made a sound of disgust. And you just kept working with her, knowing she was murdering innocent women. What was I supposed to do? Derek's voice rose defensively. Turn her in. She's my mother's stepmother. She raised me, taught me everything. You don't just walk away from Dorothy. No, I agreed. You wait until she's arrested and then sell her out for a plea deal. Derek flushed, but didn't deny it. His lawyer cleared his throat. My client has provided substantial cooperation. We'd like to discuss terms. After he tells us about the network, Franklin interrupted, Dorothy didn't operate alone for 15 years. Who else is involved? Derek fidgeted, clearly weighing risks. There's a lawyer in Milwaukee, handles the paperwork, sets up shell companies. A doctor in Indiana who provides medical cover for the accidents. A few others. Names, Franklin insisted. William Marsh attorney, Dr. Patricia Vance. There's also a tech guy handles the identity theft angles. Calls himself Phantom, real name's probably Jake something. Works out of Detroit. Franklin was writing furiously. Each name was another thread to pull another piece of Dorothy's network to unravel. What about Harold? I asked suddenly. How did Dorothy choose him? Derek actually laughed short and bitter. Your dad. He chose himself. Posted on some widower support forum about his ex-wife. His daughter's the unfairness of being cut out of his mother's will. Might as well have hung a sign saying, victim here. Dorothy created a profile, started messaging him. Within a week, he was hooked. Harold, who'd been silent throughout the interview, flinched. The truth of his vulnerability laid bare was painful to witness. Last question, I said, leaning forward despite the pain it caused. Dorothy's real name. You said she's your stepmother, which means you knew her before she became Dorothy. What's her actual name? Derek met my eyes. Margaret Evelyn Foster, born in Newark, 1967. But that woman died a long time ago. Whatever Dorothy is now, she's not the woman who married my father. What happened to your father? Emma asked quietly. Died when I was 12. Accidental fall down the stairs. Dorothy got his insurance, his house custody of me. His voice turned bitter. She always said he was her practice run. Taught her what worked and what didn't. The room fell silent as the weight of that settled over us. Dorothy had started by killing her own husband, then spent decades perfecting her craft. How many other practice runs had there been? How many Dereks had she created along the way? Franklin ended the recording. This is good, but we need more. Lucy, have you heard back about the interview request? I checked my phone. Her lawyer responded. They're interested but want to see questions in advance. Full editorial control. Give it to them, Franklin said. Let them think they're in charge. Meanwhile, we'll use Derek's information to round up the network. By the time Dorothy realizes what's happening, we'll have her entire operation mapped. As the agents prepared to take Derek back to federal holding, he looked at Emma one last time. For what it's worth, you were different. The others were just marks, but you... I actually felt bad about it sometimes. Save it, Emma said coldly. Feeling bad didn't stop you from destroying my life. After they left, the three of us sat in silence. The man who'd nearly orchestrated my death had just handed us the keys to Dorothy's kingdom, but the victory felt hollow. Sarah Chen was still dead. Others were too. Justice wouldn't bring them back. Now what? Harold asked, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Now we prepare for the real show, I said. Dorothy thinks she's getting a platform to spin her story. Instead, she's walking into a trap 15 years in the making. Her Grandma Rose would be proud, Emma said softly. No, I corrected. Grandma Rose would say we're not done until every victim gets justice and every accomplice faces consequences. This is just the beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Interview approved. Dorothy's lawyer wants to meet tomorrow to discuss terms. Also, the prosecutor says if we can flip her entire network, he'll recommend medium security instead of supermax for Derek. Your call. I showed the text to Franklin. What do you think? I think Rose Winters raised a chess player, he said with something like admiration. Let's see how many pieces we can capture. The meeting with Dorothy's lawyer took place in the federal building's sterile conference room. Martin Kellerman was exactly what you'd expect from someone willing to defend a serial killer expensive suit, calculating eyes and a smile that never reached beyond his lips. Ms. Winters. He began spreading documents across the table. My client is willing to participate in a limited interview under strict conditions. No video recording, only audio. Questions submitted in advance. Full editorial control over the final transcript. Agreed, I said, earning surprised looks from Franklin and the prosecutor. But we want the interview conducted in the federal facility with my family present. Kellerman's eyes sharpened. Why the family? Because Dorothy's defense will likely center on how she was helping reunite a fractured family. Having Harold and Emma there provides context. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Your client can demonstrate her compassion, show how she was trying to heal family wounds before everything went wrong. It was bait wrapped in flattery, and Kellerman swallowed it whole. I'll discuss it with my client. What about timing? Tomorrow afternoon, Franklin suggested. Give everyone time to prepare. After Kellerman left the prosecutor, Janet Mills turned on me. Full editorial control. Are you insane? She won't use it, I said confidently. Dorothy's fatal flaw is her ego. She'll want every word of her brilliance preserved. The more control we appear to give her, the more she'll reveal. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Mariah worked with the FBI's technical team to ensure every word would be captured regardless of what agreements were signed. Franklin coordinated raids on the network members Derek had identified. By morning, William Marsh and Dr. Patricia Vance were in custody. The tech specialist, Phantom, remained at large, but his Detroit operation had been shut down. I spent the time reviewing Dorothy's past crimes, studying her patterns, preparing questions designed to stroke her ego while extracting confessions. Emma helped her insight into Derek's manipulation techniques, proving invaluable. Even Harold contributed, sharing details about Dorothy's behavior that revealed her methods. She always knew things, he said during one session. Things I hadn't told her, said she was just intuitive, understood me. Now I realized she'd researched everything before we even met. The day of the interview arrived gray and oppressive, with storm clouds gathering over Chicago, fitting weather for confronting a monster. I dressed carefully, professional, but not intimidating, vulnerable enough to make Dorothy comfortable, but not so weak she'd dismiss me. You sure about this? Maria asked for the 100th time as we prepared to leave for the federal facility. No, I admitted. But I'm sure about the goal. Every word she says is evidence. Every boast is another nail in her coffin. The federal holding facility was a fortress of concrete and razor wire. We passed through multiple security checkpoints before reaching the interview room. Dorothy was already there, dressed in orange, but somehow making it look dignified. Her blonde wig was gone, revealing steel gray hair cut short. Without the disguises, she looked ordinary, forgettable, which was probably her greatest asset. Lucy, she said warmly as I entered, as if we were old friends. How are you healing? I heard the accident was quite severe. The casual cruelty of it, referring to attempted murder as an accident, made my skin crawl. But I smiled. I'm recovering, thank you for asking. Harold and Emma took their seats against the wall, their presence clearly unsettling Dorothy, despite her attempts to appear calm. Agent Franklin and Prosecutor Mills positioned themselves by the door, while Maria sat beside me with the recording equipment. Before we begin, Kellerman interjected, I want to remind everyone that this interview is voluntary. My client can end it at any time. Of course, I agreed, then turned to Dorothy. I want to understand what happened. How did we get here? You married my father, became part of our family. What went wrong?" Dorothy's expression shifted to one of practiced sorrow. What went wrong was a fundamental misunderstanding of my intentions. I genuinely cared for Harold. I saw a man broken by divorce, estranged from his daughters, cut off from his family legacy. I wanted to help heal those wounds. "By poisoning him?" Emma asked sharply. Kellerman started to object, but Dorothy raised a hand. "I never poisoned anyone. Harold's illness was unfortunate timing. Antifreeze in the garage, a confused older man, tragic accident." "The FBI found the antifreeze in your possessions?" Franklin noted mildly. "For my car," Dorothy replied smoothly. "Chicago winters are brutal." I steered the conversation back. "Tell me about meeting my father. How did that happen?" Dorothy's eyes lit up the first genuine emotion I'd seen. Online support group for widows and widowers. Harold's pain called to me. He wrote so eloquently about his failures as a father, his desperate desire to make things right before it was too late. "And you saw an opportunity," I suggested carefully. "I saw a kindred spirit," Dorothy corrected, but there was a gleam in her eye. My late husband had also struggled with family relationships. I understood Harold's pain intimately. "Your late husband," I repeated, "Derek's father." A micro-expression of annoyance crossed her face. "Yes, tragic accident. He fell down the stairs." Like Sarah Chen fell down the elevator shaft. Like Miranda Walsh's husband fell off the balcony. Kellerman jumped in. "My client isn't charged with those deaths." "Yet," Mills said quietly. Dorothy studied me with those flat, shark eyes. "You've done your homework." "My grandmother taught me to be thorough," I replied. "Rose Winters. You researched her too, didn't you?" Fascinating woman," Dorothy admitted. "IRS investigator, forensic accountant, meticulous record keeper. She documented everything, including her family's dysfunctions. Made my job much easier, actually." There, it was the first crack in her facade, the need to demonstrate superiority, overcoming caution. "How so?" I pressed gently. "Her files on your family were comprehensive. Harold's favoritism toward Emma documented over decades. Your pattern of sacrifice and enabling. Emma's escalating entitlement and poor decisions. It was like reading an instruction manual." Harold made a sound of distress, but I kept my focus on Dorothy. "So you used her own records against us?" "I used the truth," Dorothy said, warming to her theme. "Every family has patterns, weaknesses that can be exploited. Sorry addressed. Your grandmother knew your family's weaknesses but did nothing to fix them. I tried to bring healing." Through identity theft and attempted murder, Dorothy's mask slipped for a moment, revealing irritation. "I had nothing to do with your accident. Derek acted independently, driven by desperation over his gambling debts." "Derek says differently," Franklin observed. "He's been very cooperative, told us about the network, the selection process, even provided documentation." "Derek is a pathological liar trying to save himself," Dorothy said dismissively. "Whatever stories he's spinning, they're fiction." "Like the story about William Marsh in Milwaukee?" I asked innocently. "Or Dr. Patricia Vance in Indiana?" Dorothy went very still. Kellerman leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, didn't your client tell you about her network?" Mills asked with feigned surprise. "Both arrested this morning, singing like canaries about their roles in the insurance fraud schemes." "That's impossible," Dorothy breathed, then caught herself. "I mean, I don't know these people." "No." I pulled out a photo Franklin had provided Dorothy with Marsh at a legal conference 5 years ago. "This isn't you." Her composure finally cracked. "You little bitch. You think you're clever. You think you've won something." Dorothy. Kellerman warned, but she was beyond listening. 15 years I've been perfecting this system," she snarled. 15 years of careful planning, flawless execution. I've removed dozens of parasites, freed up millions in inheritance for deserving recipients." Deserving like Emma, I asked, or deserving like you? I earned every penny, Dorothy spat. Do you know what it takes to maintain multiple identities, to infiltrate families, gain trust, execute plans without leaving evidence? It's an art form, and I'm a master. Mills corrected. You were a master. Now you're just another criminal facing life in prison. You can't prove anything, Dorothy insisted, but desperation was creeping into her voice. Derek's testimony is worthless. He's mentally unstable, a gambling addict. What about the recording? I asked quietly. Dorothy froze. What recording? I smiled, channeling every lesson Grandma Rose had taught me about patience and planning. The one from Harold's phone. You remember when you asked him to check your texts? But it wasn't your phone, was it? It was a burner with the recording app running. Every conversation in that hospital room captured in crystal clear audio. That's inadmissible, Kellerman protested, obtained without warrant or consent. Actually, Maria spoke for the first time. Illinois is a one-party consent state. Harold agreed to the recording, making it perfectly legal. Dorothy turned to stare at Harold with pure hatred. You recorded me. I recorded everything, Harold said quietly. From the moment you walked into my hospital room talking about Phase 2. Lucy wasn't supposed to survive the crash, was she? But when she did, you needed a backup plan, poisoning her in the hospital like you'd been poisoning me. You pathetic old fool, Dorothy hissed. You were so easy to manipulate, so desperate for affection you'd believe anything. Your own mother saw through you, that's why she left everything to Lucy, the only decent person in your miserable family. My client needs a break, Kellerman said urgently, but Dorothy wasn't finished. You want to know the truth? She leaned forward, eyes blazing. I've killed 17 people, 17 parasites who contributed nothing, meant nothing were nothing. Sarah Chen was going to destroy everything I'd built, so yes, I pushed her. Miranda Walsh's husband was abusing her. I did her a favor. Every single death made the world better by removing weak, useless people who... That's enough, Kellerman shouted, but the damage was done. Every word had been recorded, witnessed, documented. Dorothy seemed to realize what she'd done. The rage drained from her face, replaced by something that might have been fear if she were capable of it. Interview's over, Kellerman announced, gathering his papers with shaking hands. As the guards prepared to take Dorothy back to her cell, she looked at me one last time. Your grandmother would be proud. She was the only one who ever came close to catching me. She did catch you, I corrected. It just took 15 years for the trap to close. Dorothy laughed bitter and sharp. The Rose Winters Fund for Financial Justice. I heard about your little foundation. You think you can save them all? The overlooked daughters, the family scapegoats? No, I admitted. But I can try, and every woman we help is one less victim for predators like you. The guards led her away, but her words lingered in the air like poison. 17 victims, 17 families destroyed, and those were just the ones she admitted to. Did we get it all? I asked Franklin once Dorothy was gone. He checked with the tech team, then nodded. Every word. Between this and Derek's testimony, she'll never see freedom again. Emma was crying quietly, Harold's arm around her shoulders in an awkward attempt at comfort. Seeing them together trying to bridge years of dysfunction was both heartbreaking and hopeful. It's over, Harold said, though he seemed to be trying to convince himself. The arrest is over, I corrected. The trials, the healing, the rebuilding that's just beginning. Mills approached with a satisfied expression. 17 murder confessions, detailed fraud admissions, and she implicated her entire network. This is the best outcome we could have hoped for. What about the victims' families? I asked. Sarah Chen's parents, the others do, they know. We'll be reaching out to all of them, Franklin assured me. Thanks to you, they'll finally have answers. Justice. As we prepared to leave, Emma touched my arm. Lucy. What Dorothy said about Grandma Rose being the only decent person in our family, she was wrong. You're decent. You always have been. Decent people don't always make decent choices, I replied, thinking of all the times I'd enabled our dysfunction. But maybe that's what we work on next, making better choices. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke as we exited the federal building. Rain poured down in sheets, washing the city clean. It felt appropriate, a cleansing after so much poison. Oh, what now? Maria asked, raising an umbrella over both of us. Now we go home, I said, all of us, and we figure out how to be a family without someone trying to kill us for money. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever completely. But it was a start. And after everything we'd survived, a start felt like a miracle. The 3 weeks following Dorothy's arrest passed in a whirlwind of legal procedures, medical appointments, and awkward family dinners. The media attention was overwhelming. Every news outlet wanted the exclusive on the grandmother's revenge, as they dubbed our story. I declined most interviews, focusing instead on establishing the Rose Winters Fund while my body healed from the accident. It was during one of these quiet recovery days that Emma showed up at my apartment unannounced and clearly distressed. She looked healthier than she had since the ordeal therapy was working. The shadows under her eyes had faded, but something new troubled her. I need to tell you something, she said, clutching a worn manila envelope. Something I couldn't say with the FBI recording everything. I set aside the grant application I'd been reviewing and gestured for her to sit. What's going on? Emma took a shaky breath. Remember when Derek said I was harder to manipulate than the others? That I kept talking about you wanting to ask for help? Yes. There's a reason for that. She opened the envelope, pulling out photographs and documents I didn't recognize. Lucy, I need to tell you about the first time someone tried to kill me. I was 16. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Her name was Vanessa Cord. She was my best friend sophomore year. Beautiful, popular, from a wealthy family. Everyone wanted to be her friend, but she chose me. Emma's voice was distant, lost in memory. I was so flattered. The pretty Winters sister finally had someone who saw her as more than Harold's favorite. I studied the photos, teenage Emma with a stunning blonde girl, both smiling at the camera with the careless joy of youth. But something in the blonde girl's eyes seemed calculating even then. Vanessa had problems at home. Her older brother was the golden child set to inherit everything from their grandfather's estate. She was just the spare, as she put it. We bonded over that, the unfairness of family hierarchies. Emma, where is this going? She tried to frame me for her brother's death, Emma said flatly. She'd been poisoning him, slowly making it look like a chronic illness, but she needed someone to take the fall when he finally died. She chose me. My hands trembled as I examined the documents, police reports, medical records, court transcripts, all dated 12 years ago, all sealed juvenile records. How do I not know about this? Harold paid to keep it quiet. Hired the best lawyers, made deals with prosecutors. Vanessa's family had more money, but we had evidence. I'd been recording our conversations for a school project on friendship. Caught her admitting everything. My God, Emma. She went to juvenile detention until she turned 18, then disappeared. Last I heard, she'd changed her name and moved to Europe. Emma pulled out another photo, this one recent, until I saw this in Derek's apartment. The photo showed Derek with a woman who could have been Vanessa's older sister. Same bone structure, same calculating eyes, different hair color. You think Vanessa was connected to Dorothy's network? I know she was, Emma said firmly. After the arrest at Mercy General, I went back to Derek's apartment with the FBI, found a hidden safe with documents. Vanessa Cord is listed as a talent scout for Dorothy's organization. She identifies potential victims and grooms them for Derek or others. Emma, we have to tell Franklin. I did. He's investigating. But Lucy, don't you see what this means? Emma's eyes filled with tears. I was marked 12 years ago. Vanessa failed to use me then, so they sent Derek to finish the job. My whole life, I've been surrounded by predators, and I never knew. I moved to sit beside her, processing this revelation. Emma hadn't just made bad choices, she'd been systematically targeted since she was a teenager. This doesn't excuse what I did to you, Emma continued quickly. I still chose to steal your identity to betray your trust, but maybe it explains why I was so easy to manipulate. Vanessa trained me to doubt my own instincts, to depend on others' validation. By the time Derek arrived, I was already primed. Why didn't you ever tell me about Vanessa? Emma laughed bitterly. Harold forbade it, said it would damage my reputation, my chances at a good marriage. Better to pretend it never happened. He made me promise never to tell anyone, especially you. Because I would have protected you, I realized. I would have watched for signs, taught you to defend yourself. Instead, he left me vulnerable. Emma wiped her eyes. The therapy is helping me understand how Harold's protection was really just another form of control. He didn't want me strong. He wanted me decorative. We sat in silence, the weight of this new truth settling between us. All these years I'd resented Emma for being spoiled, entitled, careless with others' feelings. But she'd been fighting battles I never knew existed, handicapped by the very favoritism I'd envied. There's more, Emma said eventually. The FBI found Vanessa. She's been living in New York under the name Victoria Kellogg, working as a financial advisor. Guess what her specialty is? Estate planning. I said, the pieces falling into place. For wealthy families with complicated inheritances, she identifies targets, passes them to Dorothy's network. The FBI estimates she's facilitated at least 30 frauds over the past decade. 30 families destroyed, I murmured. How many Emmas were created? How many sisters turned against each other? Too many, Emma agreed. But it ends now. I've agreed to testify against Vanessa. She won't remember the girl she tried to destroy, but I remember everything. I squeezed her hand. You're brave to do this. No, brave is what you did walking into that hospital knowing it was a trap. I'm just trying to balance the scales a little. She paused, gathering courage. There's one more thing. The money I stole from you, I've been working with a forensic accountant to trace where it went. Most went to Derek's fake creditors, but we've recovered about 30,000 from accounts that hadn't been emptied yet. Emma, that's wonderful. I'm not keeping it, she interrupted. It's going to the Rose Winters Fund as the first official donation, and I've been working with Maria on something else, a support group for identity theft victims who were targeted by family members. The hardest part isn't the financial recovery, it's the emotional betrayal. I looked at my sister with new eyes. She wasn't the shallow princess I'd painted her as for so long. She was a survivor who'd been gaslit into becoming a weapon, then found the strength to transform into something else entirely. I've been thinking about Grandma Rose's letter, Emma continued, about breaking cycles. Our family's cycle wasn't just Harold's favoritism, it was the way we let others define our worth. You through sacrifice me, through beauty and charm. Neither of us learned to value ourselves for who we really were. What do you think we really are? I asked. Survivors, Emma said without hesitation. Flawed, complicated, sometimes bitter survivors who are trying to build something better. And maybe that's enough. A knock at the door interrupted us. Maria entered with Agent Franklin, both looking grim. What's wrong? I asked, reading their expressions. Phantom, Franklin said. The tech specialist Derek mentioned. We thought we'd shut down his operation, but he's been busy. He sent this to the federal prosecutor's office an hour ago. He handed me a printed email. The Winters family thinks they've won, but they've only scratched the surface. Dorothy was middle management in something much bigger. The grandmother knew. Check her sealed files dated 1987. The real architects are still active, still hunting. This was never just about inheritance fraud. You caught one tentacle of the octopus. 7 remain. Grandma Rose's files from 1987. I looked at Maria. She would have been working the Marchetti case then, the congressman who died in that yacht explosion. Along with his 3 adult children, Maria added her legal mind, already connecting dots. leaving everything to his young second wife who disappeared before the will was probated. Franklin nodded grimly. We're pulling all of Rose's old case files. If Dorothy was middle management, we need to know who she reported to. Emma stood her new resolve evident. Then, we keep fighting. They targeted our family because they thought we were weak. Let's show them what happens when weak people find their strength. As they discussed next steps, I thought about cycles and choices. Emma had been marked as a victim at 16, but refused to remain one. I'd been groomed as a sacrifice, but chose to fight back. Harold had been selected as an easy mark, but found courage to record evidence. We were still a broken family. Trust would take years to rebuild if it ever fully returned. But we were broken in a way that made us sharp like glass that could cut those who tried to grasp us wrongly. Grandma Rose had known this day would come. She'd prepared us not by protecting us from predators, but by ensuring we'd survive them. The Rose Winters Fund would help other families do the same, not just recover financially, but recognize the patterns that made them vulnerable. Lucy. Emma touched my shoulder, bringing me back to the present. You okay? Yeah, I said, meaning it for the first time in months. We're going to be okay, all of us. Outside my apartment window, Chicago sprawled beneath gray skies. Somewhere in that urban maze, 7 more tentacles of a criminal organization were still hunting vulnerable families. But now they faced something they hadn't expected: survivors who refused to remain victims, sisters who'd chosen connection over justified anger, and the legacy of Rose Winters living on through every family we helped save. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I believed we could win it. 6 months later, I sat in Federal Courtroom 3, watching Dorothy Crawford. She'd legally dropped all her aliases face judgment for her crimes. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, media, and law enforcement officials who'd worked her cases across 7 states. Emma sat beside me, our hands clasped tightly as we waited for the verdict. The trial had been a marathon of testimony, evidence, and revelations. Over 3 weeks, prosecutors had laid out the full scope of Dorothy's 15-year killing spree. 17 murders confirmed, possibly more. Millions stolen through elaborate inheritance frauds. Families destroyed by calculated psychological warfare. I testified on day 3, walking the jury through the night at Mercy General, the recording that captured Dorothy's confessions. Emma followed bravely, detailing her manipulation by Derek and the identity theft that had been weaponized against me. Even Harold had taken the stand, his voice steady, as he described his own poisoning and Dorothy's psychological control. But it was the testimony of other survivors that truly sealed Dorothy's fate. Marcus Chen, Sarah's brother, spoke about finding her body and the years of guilt, thinking her death was suicide. Patricia Walsh revealed how Dorothy had befriended her after her father's death, almost becoming victim number 18 before our arrest spooked her into fleeing. One after another, they painted a picture of a predator who fed on family dysfunction like a parasite. As the jury reached a verdict, Judge Harrison's voice brought me back to the present. The foreman stood, a middle-aged woman with steel in her spine. "We have your honor." "On the charge of murder in the first degree and the death of Sarah Chen, how do you find—" "Guilty." The word rang through the courtroom like a bell. Emma's hand tightened on mine as the foreman continued through all 43 charges. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each verdict a small measure of justice for the lives Dorothy had stolen. Dorothy herself sat motionless, her shark eyes fixed on some point beyond the courtroom. She dressed carefully for the verdict, a conservative suit that made her look like someone's grandmother, not a serial killer. But the illusion couldn't hold against the weight of evidence. "Ms. Crawford," Judge Harrison said after the last guilty verdict was read, "you will be remanded to custody until sentencing. Given the severity and number of your crimes, I'm inclined to agree with the prosecution's recommendation of life without the possibility of parole." Your Honor, Dorothy's lawyer stood. We intend to appeal. As is your right, the judge cut him off. But your client will do so from federal prison. Court is adjourned. As guards moved to take Dorothy away, she turned to look at me. For a moment, our eyes met across the courtroom. I expected hatred, rage, some final attempt at psychological manipulation. Instead, I saw something else, a flicker of what might have been respect. Tell Rose she won, Dorothy said, just loud enough for me to hear. Then she was gone, shuffled away in chains to begin a life sentence that would end only with her death. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of tears, relief, and exhausted triumph. Families who'd waited years for answers embraced. Prosecutors shook hands with investigators. Justice had been served even if it couldn't resurrect the dead. It's over. Emma breathed her own tears flowing freely. It's really over. This part is, I corrected gently, but there's still work to do. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. I'd prepared a statement with Maria's help, knowing this moment would draw attention. Today's verdict brings justice for 17 families, but it also reminds us that predators like Dorothy Crawford don't operate in isolation. I read into the cluster of microphones. They exploit family dysfunction, target the vulnerable, and count on shame to keep their crimes hidden. The Rose Winters Fund will continue working to protect families from financial predation and help survivors rebuild their lives. No one should have to face these predators alone. Ms. Winters, a reporter called out, what about the email suggesting Dorothy was part of a larger organization? Any progress on that investigation? Agent Franklin stepped forward. The FBI is actively investigating all leads. What I can say is that Dorothy Crawford's conviction has led to multiple arrests across the country. Her network is being systematically dismantled. As Maria fielded additional questions, I noticed a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd. Harold stood alone, looking lost, despite the victory we'd just witnessed. The months since Dorothy's arrest had been hard on him. The poisoning had left lasting effects, and the psychological damage of realizing he'd brought a killer into our lives had aged him dramatically. I excused myself and walked over to him. Dad, I wasn't sure I should come, he said quietly. Didn't know if you'd want me here. You testified, I reminded him. You helped put her away. After I helped her nearly kill you. The guilt in his voice was thick. Lucy, I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand how I became such a terrible father, why I failed you so completely. What have you learned? I asked, genuinely curious. Harold sighed, looking every one of his 63 years. That I confused love with control. I thought protecting Emma meant keeping her dependent, and I thought you were strong enough not to need protection at all. I was wrong on both counts. Yes, you were. He flinched at my blunt agreement, but continued. The therapist says I recreated my own childhood. My father ignored me in favor of my brother, so I overcorrected with Emma. But in doing so, I just perpetuated the cycle with you. Cycles can be broken, I said, thinking of all the families we'd helped through the fund. But it takes work. Real work, not just guilt. I know. That's why I've been volunteering with the Elder Financial Abuse Program you set up, teaching other seniors how to spot manipulation, how Dorothy targeted me. It's humbling. But maybe my stupidity can save someone else. It was the first genuinely selfless thing I'd heard Harold say in years. Maybe ever. Emma appeared at my elbow, having escaped the media scrum. Dad, you came. I had to, Harold said simply, to see it end, to see her pay for what she did to my daughters. The possessive still rankled my daughters as if we were property, but I recognized the attempt at protection, however late it came. There's a victims gathering at Rossetti's, Emma told him. Just families, no media. You could come if you want. Harold looked between us, surprise clear on his face. You'd want me there. We're trying to build something new, I said. Maybe it's time you tried too. The gathering at Rossetti's was bittersweet. Families who'd been torn apart by Dorothy's schemes shared stories, contact information, promises to support each other through the healing process. Marcus Chen presented me with a photo of Sarah asking if we could create a memorial scholarship in her name through the fund. She was planning to go back to school, he explained. Social work. She wanted to help other families dealing with a financial crisis. Maybe someone else can fulfill that dream. We'll make it happen. I promised, adding Sarah's photo to the growing memorial wall we'd created at the fund's office. Derek's sentencing was scheduled for the following week. He'd pled guilty to multiple charges in exchange for testimony against Dorothy and the network. With good behavior, he might be out in 15 years, still young enough to start over if he chose to. Do you think he meant it? Emma asked during a quiet moment, when he said I was different from the others. Does it matter? I countered. What matters is that you survived him, that you're helping other women avoid the same trap. Emma's support group had grown to 3 chapters across Chicago with online sessions for those who couldn't attend in person. She'd become an advocate I never expected, turning her pain into purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, Maria called for attention, raising her glass of wine. A toast to justice-served families reunited and Rose Winters, who saw this day coming long before any of us. We raised our glasses, a room full of survivors, honoring the woman who'd made this victory possible. But even as we celebrated, I couldn't forget Phantom's warning. 7 more tentacles. Dorothy might be in prison, but the organization that created her was still out there, still hunting. Lucy. Franklin appeared at my side. We need to talk, privately. I followed him to a quiet corner, noting the tension in his expression. We decoded more of Rose's files, he said quietly. The organization Dorothy worked for, it's been operating since the 1950s. Multi-generational, with tentacles in law enforcement, judiciary, even politics. Dorothy wasn't middle management. She was a franchise owner in a much larger operation. How large? We've identified similar patterns in 12 countries. Hundreds of operatives, thousands of victims. Rose spent 40 years documenting what she could, but even she only saw pieces. The scope was staggering. We'd celebrated catching 1 killer while an army remained free. What do you need from me? I asked. Keep doing what you're doing. The fund, the awareness campaigns, the support networks. Every family you strengthen is one they can't exploit. He paused. And be careful. Phantom's still out there, and he's not happy about Dorothy's conviction. We have intelligence suggesting he might target you directly. Let him come, I said with more confidence than I felt. We've faced worse. Franklin smiled grimly. That's what I'm counting on. Rose chose her successor well. As the gathering continued around us, I thought about the work ahead. Dorothy was behind bars, but her legacy lived on in every family still vulnerable to predators. The Rose Winters Fund had helped over 100 families in 6 months, but there were thousands more who needed us. You okay? Emma asked, returning to my side. Yeah, I said, meaning it, just thinking about what comes next. Whatever it is, we face it together, she said firmly. No more secrets, no more isolation. That's how they got us before. Harold joined us, still awkward but trying. We stood together, 3 survivors of Dorothy's manipulation, imperfect but united. Around us, other families shared the same tentative reconnection, proof that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. The war against predators like Dorothy would continue. Phantom and his 7 tentacles would likely strike again, but they'd face something different now. Families who knew the signed survivors who'd found their voices, and the enduring legacy of Rose Winters, protecting the vulnerable from beyond the grave. Justice had been served, but our real victory was simpler. We'd survived, we'd chosen each other, and we'd broken the cycles that made us prey. For now, that was enough. The first anniversary of the crash arrived on an unseasonably warm September morning. I stood at the intersection of Maple and Fifth, looking at the spot where Dorothy's plan had literally collided with my life. The city had installed a new traffic light with better visibility, one small change that might save future lives. "You sure you want to do this here?" Maria asked, setting up folding chairs on the sidewalk. "It's where everything changed," I replied. "Seems fitting to mark the transformation here, too." We were hosting an outdoor session of Emma's support group, bringing survivors to the place where my story had begun. It was Emma's idea, confronting the physical spaces where trauma occurred, reclaiming them as sites of survival rather than victimization. "Jen, testing, testing." Emma spoke into a portable microphone. "Can everyone hear me?" 23 people had gathered, some familiar faces from our regular meetings, others who'd traveled from neighboring states. Each carried their own story of family betrayal, financial fraud, and the long journey toward healing. Harold arrived last, moving slowly but steadily with his new cane. The anti-freeze poisoning had left him with permanent nerve damage, a daily reminder of Dorothy's toxicity. He'd initially resisted joining the group. "I was a perpetrator too," he'd argued, but Emma had insisted that accountability was part of healing. "Before we begin," I addressed the group, "I want to acknowledge that some of you lost more than money or credit scores. Some lost family members. Others lost the ability to trust. We're here because we refuse to let those losses define our endings." Wasi Marcus Chen sat in the front row, Sarah's photo button pinned to his jacket. Beside him, Patricia Walsh held hands with her teenage daughter, both survivors of different predators in Dorothy's network. The diversity of ages, backgrounds, and experiences united by shared trauma never ceased to move me. Emma took the microphone, her voice steady despite the emotion I could see in her eyes. 14 months ago, I stood in an abandoned hospital, convinced I was about to die because of choices I'd made. I'd stolen from my sister, betrayed every trust, and fallen into a trap set by people who saw my weaknesses like neon signs. She paused, looking directly at me. But my sister came anyway, walked into danger to save someone who didn't deserve saving. That's when I learned the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. Victims wait for rescue. Survivors rescue each other. One by one, group members shared their stories. An elderly man whose nephew had drained his retirement accounts. A young woman whose mother had used her social security number to rack up debts before she'd even turned 18. Harold listened to each testimony with tears streaming down his face, seeing his own failures reflected in their pain. When his turn came, Harold stood shakily gripping his cane. "I'm Harold Winters, and I nearly got my daughters killed because I was lonely and arrogant." The blunt admission sent a ripple through the group. Harold had been working on directness in therapy, abandoning the corporate doublespeak that had defined his communication for decades. "I spent 30 years playing favorites, pitting my daughters against each other, creating exactly the dysfunction predators seek. When Dorothy appeared, offering affection and admiration, I didn't question why an attractive woman would want a bitter divorced man. I just grabbed what I thought I deserved." He looked at Emma and me. "My daughters saved each other despite me, not because of me. I'm here to learn how to be the father they deserved from the beginning, even if it's too late to undo the damage." "It's never too late to change patterns," Dr. Elaine Reeves interjected. She was our volunteer therapist, a woman who'd lost her own sister to a similar scheme years ago. "The fact that you're here, Harold, taking accountability publicly, that's breaking generational cycles." The session continued for 2 hours, weaving between tears, anger, and unexpected moments of dark humor that only fellow survivors could appreciate. As it concluded, Marcos Chen approached me with an envelope. "From the families," he said simply, "we pooled resources." Inside was a check for $50,000 made out to the Rose Winters Fund, along with a note for Sarah and all the others who didn't survive. Let their losses prevent future tragedies. I had to turn away to compose myself. In the years since Dorothy's arrest, the fund had grown beyond my wildest dreams. Corporate sponsors, government grants, and private donations had pushed our operating budget to nearly $2 million. We'd hired full-time counselors partnered with law enforcement agencies across 5 states and created an early warning system that had already prevented dozens of potential frauds. "Lucy," Emma called out, "someone here to see you." I turned to find a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, with prematurely gray hair and cautious eyes. "Ms. Winters, I'm Janet Morrison, formerly Janet Phelps." Phelps, Derek's ex-wife. "I know Derek's sentencing is next week," she continued quickly. "I wanted to thank you for stopping him, for revealing what he really was." "I'm sorry for what you went through," I offered, unsure what else to say. "Don't be. You saved my daughter." Janet pulled out a photo of a teenage girl. Derek had started grooming her, setting her up to be the next Emma, telling her she was special, that she didn't need college because he'd take care of her if you hadn't exposed him. "How is she now?" "Angry, confused, but in therapy." Janet smiled weakly. "She wants to be a forensic accountant. Says she's going to catch people like her father before they can hurt families." Another generation, learning from trauma, transforming pain into purpose. Rose would have been proud. As the crowd dispersed, Emma and I began collecting chairs. The September sun was climbing higher, warming the sight of so much pain. Harold helped as much as his mobility allowed, the three of us working in companionable silence that would have been impossible a year ago. "I've been thinking," Emma said eventually, "about expanding beyond Chicago. There are survivors everywhere who need what we're building. We'd need more funding, more staff." I pointed out, though I'd been having similar thoughts. "The publisher wants a sequel," Harold said unexpectedly. We both turned to stare at him. "To your book. They called me last week, wanting the father's perspective. I said no initially, but maybe my shame could serve a purpose. Show other parents how not to fail their children." The first book, Breaking the Trap of Families' Survival Against Financial Predators, had spent 3 months on bestseller lists. I donated all profits to the fund, but a sequel from Harold's perspective could double our reach. "Would you be honest?" I asked. "Completely honest about the favoritism, the neglect, the way you enabled our dysfunction?" "Brutally so," Harold promised. "No excuses, no justifications. Just truth and whatever wisdom I've gained from nearly losing everything that mattered." Emma reached for his hand, then mine, connecting us in a circle that had been broken for so long. We could do it together. 3 perspectives on the same tragedy. Show how predators exploit family weaknesses from every angle. "The publisher would love that," I admitted. "But can we handle revisiting it all?" "We revisit it every day anyway," Emma pointed out. "At least this way our pain serves a purpose." A car honked as it passed the driver, probably wondering why 3 people were having an emotional moment at a random intersection. But this wasn't random. This was where Dorothy's plan had shattered against something she never calculated, the possibility that broken people might choose to heal together rather than apart. "There's something else," I said, pulling out my phone to show them an email from Agent Franklin. "The FBI tracked down Phantom, real name Jake Morrison, no relation to Janet. He's agreed to cooperate in exchange for witness protection." "Cooperate, how?" Harold asked. "Fast. Full disclosure about the organization. Names, methods, history, going back 60 years. Franklin says it's the break they've needed to dismantle the entire network." "So it's really ending," Emma breathed. "This chapter is," I corrected. "There will always be predators, but now there are more survivors who know the signs, more families who understand their vulnerabilities. We're building immunity, one story at a time." We loaded the last chair into Maria's van, the intersection returning to its normal urban rhythm. But for us, it would always be sacred ground, the place where we nearly died and instead chose to live. "Dinner, Sunday," Harold asked tentatively. "I'm trying a new recipe, cooking classes. he added with embarrassment. Therapist says I need hobbies that involve nurturing. Sounds good, Dad, Emma said easily, the word no longer weighted with resentment. As we drove away, I looked back at the intersection one last time. In my mind, I could still see my crushed Honda, smell the gasoline and blood, feel the moment when everything broke apart. But overlaying that memory was today's image survivors, standing in sunshine, sharing strength, refusing to let trauma have the final word. Grandma Rose had written that the greatest inheritance wasn't wealth or justice, but proof that love could triumph over calculated evil. Looking at my sister and father, imperfect but trying, I finally understood what she meant. We'd never be the family we might have been without Dorothy's intervention. The scars were permanent, the trust still rebuilding, the dynamics forever altered. But we were choosing to be something new, not despite our trauma, but because of what it had taught us about the power of choosing each other. The Rose Winters Fund had helped hundreds of families recognize and resist financial predators. But perhaps our greatest victory was simpler three broken people who'd learned that healing happened not in isolation, but in the messy, complicated, painful work of staying connected. Dorothy had bet everything on our dysfunction. She'd lost because she couldn't imagine we might love each other more than we hated our wounds. 1 year later, I stood before a packed auditorium at Northwestern University, my alma mater, preparing to deliver the keynote address at the National Conference on Financial Crime Prevention. The PowerPoint behind me displayed a simple statistic: 1-47 families protected, 89 predators prosecuted, $43 million in attempted fraud prevented. These numbers represent the visible victories. I began looking out at an audience of law enforcement officials, social workers, financial advisors, and survivors. But the real triumph isn't measurable. It's in the teenage girl who recognizes love bombing before giving her boyfriend her banking information. It's in the elderly man who questions why his new friend needs his social security number. It's in the family that chooses transparency over shame when fraud touches their lives. In the front row, Emma sat with her laptop, live tweeting key points to our 50,000 followers. Beside her, Harold managed the visual presentations, having become surprisingly tech-savvy in his mid-60s. Maria coordinated with the camera crew. This speech would become part of our online training program, free to anyone who needed it. Financial predators count on 3 things. I continued clicking to the next slide. Family dysfunction, isolation, and shame. They're emotional vampires who feed on our weaknesses, our secrets, our desperate need to believe someone cares. But here's what Dorothy Crawford and others like her never understood: those same vulnerabilities, when acknowledged and shared, become our greatest strengths. I caught Marcus Chen's eye in the 3rd row. He now ran our West Coast operations, having transformed his grief over Sarah's death into a mission that had saved dozens of lives. Patricia Walsh sat beside him, recently certified as a financial crimes counselor, her own survival story inspiring others to seek help. 2 years ago, I was hit by a truck at the intersection of Maple and 5th in Chicago, I said, letting the words hang in the air. The driver was hired by a serial killer who'd infiltrated my family, targeting us for an inheritance I didn't even know existed. That should have been the end of my story. The auditorium was silent, hundreds of people leaning forward. Instead, it became the beginning. Because when predators strike, they create something they never intend: survivors who understand their methods. Families who've seen behind the mask, communities united by shared experience. Every crime they commit teaches us how to prevent the next one. I clicked through slides showing our programs: Emma's support groups now in 17 cities, Harold's senior education initiative that had reached 10,000 elderly Americans, the early warning system that flagged suspicious inheritance patterns before tragedies occurred. But perhaps our most important work isn't in the programs or prosecutions. I said, moving to the final section. It's in changing how we think about family vulnerability and strength. A photo appeared on the screen, Emma, Harold, and me at last year's Thanksgiving dinner. We looked like any family gathering, laughing over Harold's slightly burned turkey, Emma sneaking Brussels sprouts to my new rescue dog, me caught mid-story about a recent case. Normal, imperfect, alive. This is my family, I said simply. We're not special. We're not particularly strong or wise. We're people who hurt each other, failed each other, and nearly lost each other to a predator who saw our cracks as entry points. But we're also people who chose to fill those cracks with something stronger than the original foundation: honesty, accountability, and the radical decision to show up for each other even when trust felt impossible. Amen, someone called out from the audience, sparking spontaneous applause. Dorothy Crawford is serving 17 consecutive life sentences. I continued when the noise died down. Derek Phelps will be eligible for parole in 2039. The network they operated has been dismantled, its leaders prosecuted, its methods exposed. But new predators emerge every day, evolving their tactics, seeking fresh vulnerabilities. Our work isn't finished. It never will be. I paused, thinking of Grandma Rose, whose portrait now hung in the fund's main office. Her files had led to the prosecution of 37 additional criminals across 12 states. Even in death, she protected the vulnerable. So, what do? I asked the audience. We build communities of survivors who refuse to be silenced by shame. We educate families about the patterns predators exploit. We support law enforcement with resources and recognition. Most importantly, we tell our stories, messy, painful, imperfect, because every story shared is a potential life saved. The presentation shifted to resources websites, hotlines, local contacts for every state represented in the audience, QR codes for immediate access to help. I want to leave you with something my grandmother wrote, I said, pulling out Rose's letter worn soft from handling. The greatest inheritance I leave you isn't wealth or justice, but the proof that love can triumph over even the most calculated evil. She was right. Love isn't just sentiment, it's action. It's choosing to save someone who betrayed you. It's admitting fault after decades of denial. It's building networks of support that make us harder to hunt. I looked directly at the camera crew, knowing thousands more would watch this online. If you're watching this because someone in your family has been targeted, know this: you're not alone. The shame isn't yours to carry. The predator chose your family because they saw something worth stealing. But what they saw as weakness, your trust, your love, your willingness to help, these are actually your strengths. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The timer showed I had 2 minutes left. Time for the call to action. Visit rosewintersfund.org. Share your story if you're ready. Read others if you're not. Donate if you can, volunteer if you can't. But whatever you do, don't stay silent. Don't let shame keep you isolated. That's what they count on. I smiled, feeling the truth of my next words. My name is Lucy Winters. 2 years ago, I survived attempted murder by a family financial predator. Today, I run an organization that's prevented over 1,000 families from experiencing similar trauma. Tomorrow, with your help, we'll save even more. Because every family protected is a victory not just against individual criminals, but against the systems that enable them. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was too busy watching Emma rush the stage to hug me, Harold struggling to his feet despite his cane to join us, Maria wiping tears as she directed the camera crew to capture what came next. We have a surprise, Emma whispered in my ear. The auditorium screen changed to show a live feed. Agent Franklin stood in front of the FBI headquarters, a crowd of officials behind him. Ladies and gentlemen, Franklin's voice filled the auditorium. Thanks to the work of the Rose Winters Fund and the bravery of survivors nationwide, I'm pleased to announce Operation Heritage Shield. a joint task force between federal and state authorities funded for the next decade dedicated to preventing inheritance fraud and protecting vulnerable families. Lucy Emma Harold, this is your legacy. The auditorium erupted again, but I could only stand there holding my family, thinking of all the families who wouldn't have to experience what we had. All the Sarahs who would live, all the Emmas who wouldn't be targeted, all the Harolds who'd see through the manipulation. Grandma Rose would be so proud, Emma said through her tears. She'd say the work isn't done. I corrected, but I was smiling. She'd remind us that every victory reveals new vulnerabilities. She'd insist we stay vigilant. She'd also say to celebrate when you win, Harold added, producing a flask from his jacket pocket. Cranberry juice, he clarified at our looks, with sparkling water. My liver can't handle champagne anymore, but we're still toasting. We passed the flask between us three survivors, toasting in front of 700 witnesses. It should have felt performative, but instead, it felt like completion. Not an ending, but a transformation finished. The questions came next, thoughtful and challenging. How to identify early warning signs, resources for rural communities, strategies for families with language barriers. Each question reminded me how much work remained, but also how many people were committed to doing it. As the conference concluded, people approached with their own stories, business cards, offers of partnership. A tech executive wanted to fund an app for secure family financial communication. A retired FBI profiler offered to teach seminars on psychological manipulation. A Hollywood producer pitched a documentary series following survivors through their recovery. But the interaction that mattered most came as we prepared to leave. A young woman, maybe 25, approached hesitantly. Ms. Winters, I'm Jennifer. You don't know me, but Dorothy Crawford was grooming my grandmother when you caught her. Graham had just inherited my grandfather's estate. Dorothy had already convinced her to change her will, but your arrest happened 2 days before they were supposed to meet with the lawyer. Your grandmother's safe, I asked. Thanks to you, all of you. Jennifer looked at our family. Graham's here, actually. She wanted to thank you but felt too embarrassed. Said she should have known better at her age. Oh, tell her there's no age limit on being targeted, Harold said firmly. I'm proof of that. Also tell her we have excellent senior programs if she'd like to help others recognize the signs. As Jennifer hurried off to find her grandmother, I realized this was how change happened. Not in grand gestures, but in small connections, one saved family at a time. Dorothy had created ripples of destruction. We were creating waves of prevention. Ready for Phase 2, Emma asked as we gathered our materials. Phase 2, the international expansion partnering with Interpol to track cross-border inheritance and fraud. The legislative push for stricter penalties and better victim protection. The documentary series that would bring our message to millions. After dinner, I decided, Harold's cooking and I'm actually hungry. It's lasagna, Harold warned. Might be slightly experimental. I added butternut squash. Sounds terrible, Emma said cheerfully. I'll bring wine. I'll bring antacids, Maria added. As we left the auditorium, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart raced. Old trauma responses die hard. Then I read the message. Your grandmother would be proud. The work continues. A friend in the shadows. I showed it to Franklin, who was coordinating security for our exit. Oh, Phantom, he guessed. He's in witness protection, but still monitors criminal networks. Could be his way of saying thanks. Or warning us that the work was far from over. Either way, he was right. The work continued. But now we had an army of survivor systems of support and the hard-won knowledge that families could be broken and rebuilt stronger. The Chicago skyline gleamed in the late afternoon sun as we drove toward Harold's apartment. In my bag, I carried notes for 3 more speeches. 5 partnership proposals, and a letter from a 12-year-old girl whose mother had recognized and escaped a romance scam thanks to our materials. Hey, Emma said suddenly. I love you, both of you. I don't say it enough, but I do. Oh, love you too, Em. I replied easily, the words no longer difficult. Harold cleared his throat. I love my daughters. Should have protected that love better from the start, but I'm grateful for the chance to show it now. Maria pretended to gag from the driver's seat. You're all getting way too sentimental. Save it for the sequel, which, by the way, is due to the publisher in 3 months. Prem, Family Fraud, 3 Perspectives on Survival, would release next year. We donated the advance to create the Sarah Chen Memorial Scholarship. 10 young women would attend social work school debt-free, carrying on Sarah's dream of helping families in crisis. As we pulled up to Harold's building, I thought about cycles and choices one more time. Dorothy had seen our dysfunction and thought it made us perfect victims. She'd been right about the dysfunction, but wrong about everything else. We weren't perfect victims. We were imperfect humans who'd chosen to transform our pain into purpose, our betrayal into bonds, our near destruction into a foundation for saving others. Last one inside does dishes, Emma called out already, sprinting for the door despite her designer heels. No running, Harold protested. Respect your elders. Then keep up, old man. I shot back, helping him navigate the steps while Emma held the door laughing. We were the Winters family, broken, rebuilt, and stronger at the seams. Dorothy had tried to shatter us, but we'd become a mosaic instead, more beautiful, for having been broken, more valuable for knowing we could survive. Inside Harold's apartment, the smell of possibly experimental lasagna filled the air. Emma set the table while I opened wine. Harold fussed with garlic bread, muttering about proper browning techniques. Maria fielded calls from partners and prosecutors, keeping the outside world at bay for one peaceful evening. This was our new beginning. Not perfect, not without scars, but ours. Built on truth instead of lies, transparency instead of secrets, and the radical belief that love wasn't just a feeling but a choice we made every day. Somewhere, Dorothy sat in a federal prison cell, probably plotting appeals she'd never win. Derek counted days until a parole that might never come. The organization they'd served was dismantled, its tentacles severed, its methods exposed. But we weren't defined by our enemies anymore. We were defined by what we'd built from the ashes they'd created. The Rose Winters Fund, the survivor networks, the families we'd protected, the future we were actively creating where financial predators found fewer cracks to exploit because we'd taught families how to fill them with strength. A toast. Harold proposed raising his cranberry juice to Grandma Rose, who saw this day coming, to the families we've helped and those we've yet to reach, and to us proof that love really can triumph over calculated evil. To us, Emma and I echoed our glasses, meeting with a crystalline chime. Outside, Chicago pulsed with life, millions of families navigating their own dynamics, their own vulnerabilities. Some would face predators, but increasingly they'd face them with knowledge, support, and the hard-won wisdom of survivors who refused to let shame silence their stories. The work would never be finished. New predators would emerge, new tactics would evolve, new families would need protection. But we'd be ready, not because we were special, but because we'd learned the most important lesson of all. The best defense against those who exploit family bonds is to strengthen those bonds through honesty, support, and the courage to choose each other over and over again, especially when it's hard, especially when trust feels impossible, especially when the scars still ache. That's what family really means. Not perfection, but persistence. Not absence of harm, but presence despite it. Dorothy had bet everything on our weakness. She'd lost because she never understood our strength wasn't in being unbreakable. It was in how we chose to rebuild after breaking. And we'd keep rebuilding, keep choosing, keep protecting others from the storms we'd weathered. Because that's what survivors do. We survive. Then we make sure others can too. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed a family's journey from betrayal to redemption. But this story isn't just fiction. Financial predators who exploit family dysfunction are real and they're hunting in every community. Have you or someone you know experienced family financial fraud? What warning signs do you wish you'd recognize earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone recognize a predator before it's too late. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with anyone who might benefit from learning these warning signs. Together, we can build communities of awareness that make us all harder to hunt. Thank you for joining the Winters family on their journey. Remember, you're never alone. Shame isn't yours to carry, and every survival story shared is a potential life saved. Stay strong, stay connected, stay vigilant. With gratitude and hope for your family's safety and healing, Lucy Emma and Harold Winters.